damn it, every time, y'all. Let me get this. Hey-o! I'm doing my best Jordan Marshall impression with the hard hat on and the white sunglasses he wears with no lenses. Welcome to Bass and Brews podcast. I've already got our guest in here. For the people watching, you might see, and those listening, this might be the first time ever we've got no co-host and two guests. This is wild. It's going to be a good time. And this here is part of the Santee house. And the reason we only got two instead of the other one, because he's been on the podcast twice, and Jordan was it. But we've got hashtag pro Eric, and we got Matt Millard. How y'all folks doing tonight?
We're good.
Good. Glad to be here.
That's probably the shittiest answer we have ever gotten to the opening question of Bass and Brews from two people at the same time.
Well, let me expand on that. I feel, a little bit honored, maybe just a little honored to be a part of this, especially as poorly as I performed in 2022 fishing. So I feel like anybody wants to listen to what I've got to say, they want to probably pay a little more attention to Matt than me tonight.
Well, that's we're going to talk about that a little bit, because you have sucked ass this year where you hadn't before. And, we got Matt down here. This dude, he's been kind of on a roll here lately.
Yeah. Obviously you're never up to the standard or expectation you have for yourself, but I've been consistent this year and been able to catch fish, been happy with that, but always room to improve.
Well, yeah. When you've done as shitty as I have since February, you have nowhere to go but up or fucking quit.
Yeah. Man, momentum works both ways. Eric's talking about having a bad year. You can have positive momentum and you feel like you can do no wrong, and then you also have those times where you get that monkey on your back and it's all you can do to try and get it off. And it's kind of tough once you get going that downward trend, but all it takes is one good tournament. You're back in the game.
We're going to dive into that real quick. Did y'all bring anything to drink tonight?
Yes, sir.
I've been playing in a charity golf event today, so I've been sampling for a fair amount of the day, and I've got an early flight in the morning, so I'm on the non-alcoholic piece right now, but I've had a few drinks, so.
Okay, so Eric's in charge of the podcast. He does not have administrative rights, but if he tells me to do something that needs administrative rights, I administratively handle it. If Perfect. I can still hear him. Matt, what you drinking, house?
Man, I just got a Miller Lite. Nice and simple.
Hey man, I love it. I've got it's not White Claw Surge, but it's a black Bud Light Platinum Seltzer. It's 8 alcohols. Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna be sipping on that tonight. But back to your thing about momentum and fishing. Eric, you've had for all intent and purposes, a shitty year.
Correct.
Have you been on the water as much this year as you have at least the last couple of years? Has that had something to do with it?
That's a great question. I've been kind of spoiled, really my whole life. But when I started kayak fishing, I've never been married, no kids. I've got plenty of time, and I kind of pretty much quit my real job in January, just out of more. Several different things that was going on within the organization, but it's like, I got to the point where I was like, I'm at a position in my life where I've got this real estate gig that's doing well. And it's like, I'm going to go fish. And I probably fish more this year than I ever have, so as far as reps go, it's really not a reps kind of thing. And I've probably been doing this about 7 years now, and I felt like I've gotten better every year, with the exception of this year. And this year, probably I had as big of expectations to do well as I've had in any year. And it's fishing is, I played golf a ton before fishing, and fishing is a lot like golf. I mean, there's a mental aspect to it. you need a break here and there. I've gotten some really quality bites in tournaments, and I haven't converted on those bites. And I'm fishing better than I have earlier in the year. Last year I got off to a great start, had 3 really good finishes in the Hobies, and was ranked number 1 after the first point system came out. And, been in the TOC 2 the last 3 years and nearly got in the shootout when I didn't qualify. And that's such Matt's done it and he can speak to it. And I've cashed in 1 TOC. It came in 19th last year. And I mean, when those are hammers. I mean, there's not a person in there that's not capable of winning that tournament or doing well or what we call a hammer. And so, I almost feel like that venue is better for me and my strategy. I'd rather fish against the 49 best guys as I would 200 guys or 199 guys, because I think,
Absolutely.
Matt just tested this. If you look at what's happened this year with the Hobies and how successful they've been, it's kind of a catch-22, because you've got a bunch of local hammers, and a lot of those tournaments, man, you start looking at where they're at and you start looking at who did well. It's the guys that know the most about that area. And I'm certainly not making excuses, because I had a great tournament 2 years ago at Lake Fork. I've had great tournaments, at out of town venues, but it's a little different landscape this year. And I almost feel like that some of these fish have been beat up on more because there's more people practicing, and there's nobody's really addressed, any concerns about cutting practice short. And so if you have the ability to practice the whole month before Hobie, you knock yourself out. You got till Friday at 4. And there's good and bad about that, because you don't want, we all know and love Jordan. You don't want a guy like Jordan who don't have the time that maybe I have, not to be able to come and get in the water on Friday or Thursday or whatever, works for his schedule, or Matt, he's got a busy schedule too. So I see both sides of it, but it's really, and I think, spending time with you, Paul, and at Santee Cooper, I mean, I love it. I mean, I want to do well, but it's not life or death. This is all, I've always looked at this as a hobby, and I want to compete, and I want to put my skills up against the better fishermen and fisherwomen out there. And it's funny because I see people having success, like Justin Patrick, great guy. I mean, just a great guy, and just so happy to see him do what he did at Chick. I mean, to break through and do what he did. I mean, that's fantastic,
Yeah.
and I don't care to share this. I'm 50 years old. I turned 50 in April.
Damn, you're old as fuck.
I am old AF, and I look at
we remind him of it all the time.
All the time. I get called dad. Lambert calls me dad. I mean, it's hard. I probably
he's old as hell, but he be fishing and keeping up with Jordan all the damn time.
I try.
He can
being an old soul.
But you look at the TOC, and you throw out Jody Queen, you throw out Dennison, you throw out Tim Isaacs, you throw out myself. It's a young man's game. I mean, you got Jordans, you got Matts, you got Jackstons, you got Christine, you got Guillermo, you got, it's a youthful group, and not to say that really matters, but to cover 15 miles in a day, that's nothing for these guys. Matt covers the heck out of water. Jordan covers the heck out of water. I feel like for my, age, I cover the heck out of water, and we'll make a run somewhere or plan to fish an area that's not super close to a boat ramp. And so, it's been interesting. And I've got a new boat this year. It's been a little bit of a learning curve. I've added a motor for practice. That's a little bit of a learning curve, because you can get a false sense of what you can actually do on tournament day, because you're out there cruising along at 5 miles an hour. Oh, that's not too bad to get to. And then come tournament day, after you've missed 2 big fish first thing in the morning, you're a little bit, mentally off. And you're like, man, I don't want to run 2 miles down the lake and see if I can catch another fish. So,
and you talk this up. It's the Hobie BOS Bass Open Series, and for the folks that listening that keep up with the kayak side of it and the bass professional fishing side of it, the boater side, you will with the exception of the TOC, the 10, and then the KBF National Championship, but 400 people qualify for that. But anyway, they're all open series, and you hear a lot now. The Bassmaster Open Series, they're sold out with waiting lines out the ass, and so that's the thing. People are fishing. They're into fishing as part of what's going on the last 2 years. People have had time. They bought gear. They bought boats. We're at the peak now. We're going to see it start to drop off, but it's still an open. And part of fishing in the opens, and even the pros that have gone back to the opens to requalify for bass, they talk about how hard it is to fish in those open series because there's so many people. There's folks, and the Bass Opens, they don't want to set aside a lot. They don't want to have those cutoff times because there are those locals that are going to pay that money to fish in those. And so their guides, the locals, they don't want to kick those folks out by having a 30-day no fishing period. And so it happens like that. And, and it's been talked about on other podcasts. We talked about it on ours. The way kayak fishing is going right now, at some point, there's going to be a professional series, right? We're going to get 1 or 2 leagues that have invitational or qualifying only people that go into it. But right now it is all open. So you have to deal. But we look at the folks in the TOC, for instance. We'll use that because that's what we've been talking about. That the way they keep their points, that's what we see. Sorry, my kids are coming in from the pool and everybody's laughing at me.
I like your hats.
Say hey, buddy.
My
Nobody likes your hat. Can't look Carter. Just can't look Carter.
Tennessee, baby.
Can't look Carter.
All right, buddy. Come tell me good night, okay?
Good night.
Not now, but when you go to bed. But we're gonna see that. But for now, you look at the TOC and Hobie, the people that are up there, they're the ones that are traveling to the majority of tournaments and they're doing that stuff and they're competitive and winning. So the home field advantage ain't shit. Look, I fished in the KFL with the Tar Heel Lunkers. We fished our first 2 games were at home against Alabama team. I can't remember who we competed against 2 weeks ago, but we lost both of them at home. At home.
Yeah.
I mean, these are lakes that we chose because we fish them well. So, that it's not always because you get these preconceptions of how fish are biting leading up to that tournament. But in fishing, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday or 2 weeks ago or 3 days ago. Damn fish, they do shit on an hourly basis. And so it don't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Matt, tell us about your year, dude, because you started off slow. We talked a little bit this at Santee and all this, but you've kind of turned it on here recently. I mean, tell us about this past weekend because you kicked some ass this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we're one of the few states that's lucky to have the regional Bassmaster Series. You got that Tennessee Bass Nation, and I think this was their final event on Douglas. And I fished Douglas maybe 5 or 6 times, never past about May or so, and I really wanted to qualify for that. They have their state championship, which is a 2-day event on Chickamauga in August. So I wasn't able to pre-fish or anything, but I just wanted to try and get into that top 15 to get the chick, and treated it just like I would a Hobie, honestly. I done a bunch of map study beforehand and went to that area. It was a new area I'd never been to before on the lake, had a game plan. Ended up scratching that game plan about 15 minutes in and ended up having a limit, I think, in about 40 or 45 minutes. And had a really good day and ended up finishing 5th, I think, first guy out of the money. And I was happy with that. A lot of those guys that were there actually come up a day or two ahead of time and pre-fished and got that, knowledge. Like you were saying, a home field advantage a lot of times can be a detriment, especially if you're spending a lot of time on the water leading up to that point. Like you said, you get an idea of what the fish were doing and how you were catching them a week or two ago, and you're not taking that real-time info, like what they're doing now, not what they were doing a week ago. So I think, for most people, it ends up being a detriment on the home field deal. But as far as the rest of my year goes, I did start a little bit slower. Me and Eric and Jordan and Daniel went to Texas to fish that the Bassmaster on Lake Fork, which got down there 2 days early so we could have 2 days to practice. The whole damn thing was iced over. We were sat in the VRBO basically for 2 days and couldn't do anything. Had to thaw the boats out. Went the first morning of the tournament. There's ice on the water. Like you're busting ice to put a kayak in. It was just brutal. Then we went to Toledo Bend and had a terrible 30-mile-an-hour winds on the first day. It was tough. And, Eric was talking about his slow start. And honestly, the first 3 or 4 tournaments at least that we fished, we had crazy conditions to deal with. Like the first tournament, we were busting ice at the boat ramp, like I just mentioned. Toledo Bend, day 1, we had at least 30-mile-an-hour winds. Like it really affected what you could do and what you couldn't do. Mm-hmm. And then we went to Santee Cooper, which was fishing awesome.
Let me throw something in on the Toledo Bend, and he's spot on. But the other thing that was crazy about Toledo Bend, big water. I'd never really seen anything quite that big. But
it's huge.
That was a sellout with Hobie. You had 200 boats on the water, and they had a 400 motorboat tournament going on at the same time. And even though that water was so big, you got 600 tournament anglers thinking along the same lines, and you had wind. I mean, it was miserable. It was absolutely miserable.
And weather like that will put everybody in the same areas, right? You're trying to
get out of the wind.
I love the fish. I want 10 to 15 mile per hour winds. But when you get something like that, boat, you can't 30 mile per hour winds in a bass boat. You can't cast your shit in there. Your spotlight.
Yeah, I got it wrong that day too. It was what I thought was going to be protected was not. It was rough.
Yeah. There were some guys get stuck. They couldn't literally get their kayaks back to where they launched because they were.
Luke Arian, he was one of them.
Yeah, and then there was 4 or 5 motorboats capsized. I mean, it was you get to a point, and I've been asked to be a tournament director locally and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to wear that hat because you got to make some tough decisions. That Lake Fork tournament probably should have been canceled. And I get it. I mean, I get the fact, you got people coming in from out of town. We wanted to fish. We literally had to beg our VRBO guy to let us in his garage to thaw our kayaks out. We put space heaters in the garage. And when I say thaw them out, our straps were frozen to the trailer. The cords were frozen. You had no rudder. You had no 360. I mean, I never seen anything like it. I mean, it was bananas. And then your lines were frozen. Your guides were frozen. I mean, it was insane.
And that's one thing to fish that stuff from the boat. And as kayak anglers, we accept the weather situations in our little boats. And the majority of us have boats, kayaks that are safe to be in the water in conditions like that. Not everybody. There's 200 boaters, probably some local anglers there, and some people that came that maybe don't have Hobies or old towns or things that can take big water and big waves. But in general, we do take that responsibility to be able to go out there and act safely and to make decisions to put ourselves in safe conditions. But then again, there's money on the line, so you're going to take a risk or two that might not be out there. But I mean
that's still got to be angler responsibility.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I just say that's a tough call. I think Bass, they pushed they pushed first lines back an hour and a half on Saturday. And just like Matt said, you're busting ice to get your boat in. And then it's like, as soon as you got in the water, we had thought our kayaks out, your 360, if you had a 360 froze, so you couldn't really maneuver, your rudder was froze. I was like, well, I'm going to hang out here at the boat ramp until I can actually maneuver somewhere, so.
It's rough.
You got your propane torch out there trying to heat up the kayak without melting nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Exactly.
So, and I mean, that's the thing though, when you get into that tournament side of it, and this is the way I fish. Like I like to fish to compete. I got into kayak fishing because I was going to have to compete off the back of a boat in our local clubs, and I've already done that before, and that shit sucks. And if they don't have a non-boater aspect of their club, you're fishing against all the other people in the front of the boat and this and that. So that's why I got into kayak fishing. But there's that competitive side of you that regardless of what's going on, regardless of the weather, we have to be ready to fish the shittiest conditions, because everybody knows if you got a tournament this weekend or next weekend or 8 months from now, there's going to be a cold front or some shitty ass weather that comes through on Friday or the day of the tournament. It ain't going to like, it's not going to be perfect conditions on those tournament days, but that's how we fish. Like, that's how a lot of us think about that. Every time we go fishing, like, look, we don't go fishing when it's nice out, when it's the perfect time to go fishing, either whatever your perfect time is. We go out there because, damn it, we got to go out there whenever, regardless of what's going on, we got to go out there. Eric. So, Eric, if y'all don't know Eric, #pro, that is him. #pro/pro moderator. Not to be confused with #pro neighbor. That's a whole different guy. Eric, tell us about this #pro shit, because if anybody, Matt Millard's got to go tinkle. If anybody that is on any of the KBNs or runs around in these circles, we see the #pro all the time. Where did that come from, Hoss?
Well, it's kind of funny because, I told you golf was my thing prior to getting into fishing, and we always used to make, I caddied on tour for a season, and I was in the ropes, and I actually know what professional golf is about because I saw it up close. And, you've got people that are not very good golfers that pretend like they're professional, and they have their name on their bag and all this other kind of stuff like that. And I've always kind of been like, that's some pro shit. You got your name on your bag and you're a 25 handicap. Why bother putting your name on your bag when you can't break 90? And Matt, Matt's a pretty decent golfer too. So we kind of poke fun at each other about golf, but initially the whole #pro and pro neighbor and just the whole thing.
Well, pro moderator.
So pro moderator kind of came after #pro. And
yeah, we're going to talk about that because I know when that came up. But all right, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought
it's okay.
Keep going.
But so Daniel Lyons he's an excellent fisherman, and our fishing styles are probably as far apart as they can get. I'm very instinctual and kind of fly by the seat of my pants, much like Jordan, and he is incredibly disciplined and very structured and technical, but he's very good fisherman.
Real quick, both of y'all are Tennessee, right?
We are. He lives down the street from me. That's hence the pro neighbor. He lives.
Well, no, I'm saying, fuck Daniel. He ain't here. I'm talking about you and Matt. Y'all are Tennessee.
Yeah, we're both Tennessee.
Yeah, he's in
Tennessee.
I'm in Kingsport.
And I'm in Knoxville.
Okay, is that close together? I mean,
100 miles. 100 miles. He's 100 miles northeast of me.
Yeah, about an hour and a half.
So y'all are fishing the same waters. All right.
Oh, yeah.
So for all the listeners, they're TVA lake anglers. They're Tennessee. Probably right now, the mecca of professional angling as a whole.
The Tennessee River system.
TVA. Yeah, it's a TVA. That's where everybody's moving. All right. Continue with your story, good sir.
So I used to fish some pro neighbor. Daniel has a 19-foot Phoenix, and it happens to be yellow and gold and purple because he went to LSU.
Ugh.
and his name is on his boat, like some people's name on their golf. And he gets bent out of shape when this comes up because he said, "Listen," he goes, if you buy a new boat from Phoenix, they don't give you a choice but put your name on the boat." And I said, "That is bullshit. You have to ask to have your name put on a boat or a golf bag or whatever else." And so
you can take that shit off.
you could.
You don't have
I mean,
it ain't painted on.
It is painted on. It's not a sticker.
But then they wouldn't know it was his.
It might have some kind of metal welding embroidery. It's there. I mean, it said this Phoenix boat was built for Daniel Lyons. And I'm like, wow. So we fished some club tournaments together out of his boat. And I'm kind of like you. I'm not built to be a co-angler. And so he became pro neighbor due to the name on his boat. And then as this whole thing evolved and people became self-proclaimed, PKAs, professional kayak anglers, I just kind of thought that was funny. And
hold up real quick. I thought the PKAs came from somebody that labeled a few of the anglers.
It did.
PKAs.
It did.
It wasn't self-proclaimed is the story that I heard.
Well, it probably would depend on the individual and depend on who you ask. However, I'm really not hashtag pro. Hashtag pro is more of a culture or lifestyle. And if you post a picture of a donkey fish on your social media, you're gonna get hashtag pro because I like you and I know you. Now, some people,
I ain't got no hashtag pro, and
you got to catch a big fish
in
first.
the same house as you.
Well, I mean, it is fishing related. Now, I've hashtag pro'd, Matt's girlfriend on some shit she's done. So, it can go outside of fishing, but, it's funny because even though I'm not hashtag pro, when I go to tournaments, what's up, pro? What's up, pro? People call me pro, and that's okay. That's totally fine.
But you are hashtag pro. Not one single motherfucker in this world would argue that shit. Don't say I'm not hashtag pro. That's it. Speaking of donkey catches, how about tell us about the fish you caught yesterday?
So I got to do some fun fishing yesterday and went to one of my favorite spots with a really good friend of mine who just recently retired from the military, and he had a young kid with him that was 15 from just outside of Jackson, Mississippi, and he'd never caught a smallmouth or a spot. And so we got into some really skinny water, and this is an area that's incredibly remote. My truck was the only truck in the parking lot from 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock, which is rare these days.
That must be nice.
It is. We first time we did this stretch of water, the guy that kind of turned us onto it was like, "You're not going to see anybody down here." We're like, "Yeah, right." And about midway through the float, there's 3 of us, and we heard a motorboat. It was a jet boat, and so we're like, "Well, I thought you said we weren't going to hear anybody." And it's pretty rough. I mean, you need to know what you're doing to navigate this. Well, this guy in the jet boat was with his dad. He pulls up to the first kayaker, who was a guy in front of me, and stopped, didn't wait. Super nice. Y'all catching him? How you doing? Just incredibly nice. We were probably 50 yards behind. Me and another guy were pretty close to one another. And he did the same thing. He eased up to us. "Hey, guys, you catching them? How's it going?" Blah, 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 blah. As soon as he motored off, the guy behind me goes, "Man, you know who that was, don't you?" And I was like, "No, man, I don't know who that was." He said, "Yeah, you do." And I was like, "No, I don't know who it was. It was Wesley Strader."
Huh.
And I was like, if Wesley Strader is driving, an hour and a half from where he lives to fish here, we in some pretty good water. And so I'm pretty transparent about places I fish, but that's one I keep close to the vest. And we caught it. There is a generation, aspect to this particular float, and they weren't running any water. And we probably drug about a mile in a 7-mile float because there was just no water. And it was a fairly stingy day. You know, we caught several fish between three of us, but it was far and few between the bites. And I love throwing top water. I throw a 130 trout whopper plopper all over the country. And I've caught some amazingly good fish on that lure. And I've been throwing that and just kind of getting some non-committal bites. And I just did a tackle warehouse order, and Booger Man buzz baits are back on the market. And that was probably the best buzz bait I've ever used. It's a head knocker. You know, it just hits, it knocks against the head. It's got a good blade. And I take the skirt off of it. And that particular place, the fish typically aren't super picky. So I had some Kayak noisy flapper frogs, and I said, you know what, I'm going to put this gold buzz bait on and take the skirt off, put this frog on it, and start throwing it. And I had watched Swindle do his tutorial on buzz baits, and I'd lost a lot of fish on topwater this year, and I bounced back and forth with braid and fluorocarbon and mono and this and that. And I set up a setup just like he said to do with 20-pound sniper fluoro on topwater, which doesn't make any sense to anybody. I hadn't missed a fish since. And that's what I caught that fish on. I caught that fish on that buzz bait.
Gerald says you got to keep that rod tip at like 11 o'clock too.
Well, he flips them in, and I didn't have a net yesterday. I lost my net a couple trips out. I typically lose stuff. And that fish.
Yeah, how many nets have you bought? That's what I want to know. How many nets have you went through?
I would say in 7 years, between nets and the horrifically designed whatever that visicarbon pole with the light on it is, I have whoever designed that needs to be shot directly into the face, because that, let me tell you something, it's not a matter if you're going to break it, it's when you're going to break it. So I would say in 7 years, I have at least broke 6 or 7 busy carbon flags, and I have lost as many nets. And a lot of times the nets recover themselves because I typically buy the ones that float, and the fine folks that are with me will be like, hey man, I got your net, because I typically fish faster than my coworkers, and so they'll pick up stuff that I drop in the water.
So tell us about the fish. Get to the fucking fish, man. You tell stories. You tell stories longer than I do. This is amazing.
You told me to bring my A game. So I don't know in North Carolina what they call a trophy or a citation fish, or if you have a program, but in Tennessee, they have a TARP program, Tennessee Angler Recreation Program. And so every species that's in the river system, you can get a certificate for if you send a picture in showing that the fish was this given length. And for a smallmouth, it's 20. For a largemouth, it's 22. And for a spot, it's 18. And that was a spot, and that spot was 20 3/4. And the kid that we were with had a scale, and it was 4 pounds 10 ounces. And so that's my personal. They don't typically get that big. And I've been fortunate, and Matt's known me long enough. You know, sometimes I don't catch a lot of fish, but I kind of have the knack to catch bigger fish. And I caught that spot's a personal best. I caught a meanmouth last May that was 20.5 inches. That was damn near 5 pounds. It was a monster. And some other people said they'd seen bigger ones, but that's a pretty daggone for Tennessee. I mean, that's record territory. Now they don't recognize that as a species. They do recognize it. I looked this up. They recognize a meanmouth in Texas, and the Texas state record meanmouth until recently, I think somebody caught a monster at Ivy, but it was like a 5-pounder that was 20.5 or 21 inches. But somebody caught, I think, an 8-pound meanmouth at Ivy, and that place has been churning out gorillas. But yeah, it was just a buzzbait. You know, the water's crystal clear when we were fishing. Saw a shady spot, and I was trying to make as long a cast as I could because I felt like we were spooking fish because the water was so clear, and it just blasted it, you know, and took some good drag, kind of wrapped me around a tree a little bit, and kind of fortunately, it kind of, you know, it was out just as quickly it was in, and got it up and grabbed a hold of it, and it was picture fish time.
Yeah, well, I know Gerald Swindle listens to the podcast, so Gerald, tell Gerald thank you.
No,
seriously.
Thank you, G-Man. So I met G-Man. I met G-Man down at nicest guy in the world. funny story. We were fishing a Hobie at Kentucky Lake, and it was Jordan, a guy named Ben Davis that doesn't fish much with us anymore. My trailer broke and broke. We called an Amish person that did welding. we drove up.
Whoa. How the hell does an Amish person with no electricity do welding?
Well, this particular Amish individual had a very high functioning farm, and his wife made shepherd's pie and fed us all, and we ate like we were hungry because we'd been on the water all day, and the trailer broke, and we were headed back to our VRBO, and there's not much going on in Paris, Tennessee, at Kentucky Lake, but there's a place called Paris Landing, and at typical
is that where the Eiffel Tower is?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, no. The Eiffel Tower, that's Paris, France. This is Paris, Tennessee. It's a different place. Paris, Tennessee is a little more high class than Paris, the other Paris. So
y'all ate some Paris, Tennessee snails too, huh?
So long story short, the Triton Boat Owners Tournament was on Kentucky Lake at the same time the Hobie Tournament was on. And so everybody was kind of stressed out over the day and the shepherd's pie and the welding and the trailer. They're like, man, you guys want to get a drink? We're like, yeah, let's roll in here to Paris Landing. Well, all the pro trucks were there. I'm like, well, this is interesting. And so, and of course, I don't know the pro guys like Matt does. Matt's wonderful he can tell you about anything. Jordan's the same way. But we go in there and Jordan goes, oh my gosh, there's a table and it's got Swindle and Big Show and Casey Ashley and Randy Howell and all these Boyd Duckett and just, on and on and on. And I was like, no, just calm down. And so, I've been around the block a little bit. I tell the hostess, I said, sit us next to that big table. And she said, no problem. I sit them around to drinks. And this was right before the last Bassmaster Classic, which was featured in Loudon and Knoxville. And of course, they couldn't ask a whole lot of questions and stuff. But long story short, those guys, we got some great pictures. And Jordan Marshall was probably the only human being in the world that knew Casey Ashley had an actual music CD, and they started talking about that music CD, and it was just a great night. I mean, we had a ton of fun, and we told, it was so funny because we told G-Man that Rapala should do a GT6 instead of a DT6, and it should be a Gerald Swindle line for Rapala, and he said, well. He said, that is a good idea. He said, but Iaconelli pretty much screwed that whole deal up for everybody. Okay, whatever you say, sir. I just thought that was a good idea.
No, there is no Ike hate on this thing. I have chastised Alex.
I'm not hating on him.
We're talking shit about Ike. I have got hate messages from people on here. Look, I will fight a bitch over Ike.
Don't be the messenger. I'm just telling you what the man said.
I will fight a bitch over Ike. Matt Millard. What, dude? Tell us where what brought you here to where you are today, sitting on this shitty podcast, number one in the Panama Canal, not Panama, just canal. What brought you here? What's your story, Hoss?
Man, it's probably a little different than a lot of people. I feel like a lot of the guys that's fishing the Hobies have, a lot of experience and stuff. And I have fished off and on my whole life, but it was always just something to do. Some years I might fish 2 or 3 times on the bank, or whatever. My buddy bought a bass boat probably close to 10 years ago, and I would go with him. Some years it might be 2 or 3 times. Some years it might be 10. But I shot a lot of competitive archery from probably the time I was 16 or 17 up until 2019. And so I've always had to compete at something. When I was in high school, it was a lot of golf. And then I got into the archery thing. And I kind of started I felt like I'd went as far with that as I could. And decided to, pick up fishing a little more seriously. And I had gotten a kayak and started fishing some local stuff towards the end of 2019. And then fished a full season locally in 2020. Bought my used Hobie in 2020, and then fished my first Hobie when they had it on Watts Bar in 2021. So really, I'm pretty green with the whole kayak fishing and fishing in general. I've kind of been a student of the game a little bit since I did pick it up. always trying to learn something. So I feel like that sped up my learning curve a little bit, but I hadn't really been doing it all that long.
And if y'all go check out Matt's YouTube channel, you're going to see some deer hunting videos that the production is like what you'd see on, back in the day when ESPN, all that. Dude, you had it set up doing that. I mean, professional editing, different camera angles, the shots, the stuff. I mean, now I know you really hadn't done that with fishing, but man, that was some pretty big stuff that y'all go check his stuff out. You hadn't posted stuff in a while, and we talked about this, but for the folks listening, go check out his stuff because he put out some professional shit. Y'all need to go on all his social medias, and I'll post his phone number down in the link below and text him to start doing this shit on some fishing videos because he put some, what he was putting out there is some good stuff. I mean, if he did what he was doing in the fishing world, it would be up there with the YouTube folks in quality and what you got to see. I mean, it was pretty badass, man.
He does his the fishing stuff that he's done. I mean, it's one of those deals where I know Lambert had Blanchard and Rudd on last night on KBN and talked all YouTube and nothing against those guys. I hadn't watched much of either one of those. Alex fishes some locally with us, but Matt, the thing about and I've watched some of Matt's fishing stuff. I mean, his fishing stuff is really good, and so many of the guys are not transparent with what they're doing. And then like Matt's like, I'm throwing a 9 to 14 rock crawler in red, whatever the specific color is, or I'm throwing a megabass jerkbait, and he's not only entertaining people with what's going on because he's a very good fisherman. He's educating people that, may need the information to be like, well, gosh, if I'm fishing somewhere similar to this, or sometimes during this, this time of year, would these techniques potentially work for me? And I think with bass fishing, wired to fish and tactical bassin are the two resources that 90% of guys go to. And unlike kayak catfish and, looking at it from an entertainment
here we go.
Well, I mean, from an entertainment perspective, he's Paul's a huge kayak catfish fan. He's wanting some.
I got my whiteboard out. I don't have nothing on it. I got some shit I gotta buy, but I don't have nothing on it because if I could find my fucking marker right now.
Yeah, but no, I think people go to those sites and they're looking for an answer to a question. And so they're not necessarily tuned in for a period of time. It's like, okay, what drop shot, hook shot you use? And they got a tactical bassin and they've got a tutorial on drop shots. Or it's like, okay, I'm going to get into swim bait fishing. And he's got $20 swim baits up to $300 swim baits, And
dude, I'm going to tell you, what you're talking about there has been huge for me. Like I was telling Paul a second ago is, I didn't really start fishing seriously until the end of 2019. So you can speed up the learning curve so much with the stuff you're talking about. There's so much information out there for people that want it. And like you're saying, tactical bassin's huge, wired to fish is huge. There's a bunch of other ones now, but it doesn't matter what technique or what thing you want to learn. Like all it takes is a simple search and you can know everything you need to know about fishing that technique in less than 30 minutes. Now, whether you can go apply it, who knows, but you at least know the basics and the fundamentals and you can kind of do with it what you want, but it's amazing now.
Yeah. The educational side of fishing, if you look at the YouTubers, so we really have two sides. In this podcast, Alex started this podcast based off of content creators. And so, and we'll kind of get into some of y'all stories. Obviously, we're talking about Matt's, but the content creation side. And that goes, and a lot of people put content creation out, but I've talked about this. Your content either needs to be entertaining or it needs to be educational. And so we have the clickbait stuff where folks are out there fishing in these little ponds, catching big bass, and they got great thumbnails and this and that, or you had the folks out, and that's it, because bank fishing is actually the number one, like, lure bait. Oh, look at that big old puppy dog. What's up, girl?
That's Suki.
Suki. Oh, shit. You a True Blood fan. I love it. One of the greatest TV shows ever invented. True Blood, HBO. Go watch it. But you look at that and you have, well, who's that?
That's Dixie.
Hello.
Little Dixie. My girlfriend. Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry, dude. We are pet friendly. Pets
That's
are
right.
always welcome on Bass and Brews. You go out with the content. People want to be educated. They want to be entertained. And so you can get the basics you need to go out and throw a lure, right? That's the biggest thing. A lot of people are fishing from the bank. So if they can take a technique to go fish from the bank, they're going to go try it. So what they're going to do? They're going to buy all that shit to go try this. Or you're like some of us and you're like, oh, swim baits. Hell yeah. You go buy $1,000 in rod and reels and swim baits, and you go out there and be like, this fucking shit sucks. But the education and all that, and to take it back to kayak catfishing, and so if folks don't know, Eric knows kayak catfish, Justin. When I moved to a quarter mile from the Savannah River in the Augusta, Georgia area. And I started looking at fishing stuff. It'd been years since I'd really done a lot of fishing. For whatever reason, he popped up first. And he's out there, I think at that point in time, wasn't a PA. He was on the help me out here.
He had an autopilot there for a bit, Old Town.
No, it was long before the autopilot. It was 2015.
It's hard to tell.
Not the PA. What's the one?
Outback. He had an Outback.
Outback. Yeah. So anyway, he popped up, and at this point in time, I don't know, he had 20,000 followers, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. But this dude was out there catching these monster-ass catfish in a fucking kayak, and I'm like, oh, what the hell? I'm like, holy shit, let me go watch some more of this shit. But he is entertaining. But he said he would show you where he was fishing, what he was doing. And even to this day, you go watch one of his videos, he goes through the hooks, the line, the rods, the reels, why he's there, the baits, he does a lot of entertaining stuff. Yes. And I think that's what keeps people watching that channel, but he is very educational. I mean, that's a cool thing about it. But here's the other thing. When it comes to fishing, people want to see people catch big ass fish. Bass, snook, it doesn't matter what you're doing. They want to see you catch, and he catches big ass fucking catfish out of a kayak. It's just kind of amazing. It really is.
He's fun to fish with. That's kind of one of the things is like, I wouldn't know Matt without this. I wouldn't know Jordan or you, Paul, for that matter. And
dude, we're sitting here together because I had fished one national tournament. I started catfishing in 2021. This year I had one national tournament I could go to. Hopefully I can go to more next year and the years after. But I reached out, like, I knew I was going to show up on Friday to Santee, but I texted Jordan and says, hey dude, I need a place to charge my shit up Friday night. Do you mind if I'll sleep in the truck? I don't care. I just need somewhere to plug some shit in. He goes, dude, we got extra room. And so now us three are sitting here because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, and Jordan, and because of me being on this podcast, having Jordan on this podcast is the reason that happened. So you're right. I mean, a lot of stuff happens in this small little world that we live in, not only fishing, but the kayak fishing side. People are very welcoming.
Well, yeah, the only reason I even know Eric, well, I mean, I knew who Eric was even before I met him, #pros everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But we got a mutual friend, and when I qualified for the TFC last year, he put in a good word for me that I, might be able to split a room with him or something. And Eric sent me a message asking if I, was looking for a place to stay. And I said, honestly, I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, that'd be awesome. And went down there to the TFC last year and stayed together. And then we've traveled together to all but one tournament this year. So it's wouldn't have that if it wasn't for kayak or for, kayak fishing. And like you said, everybody's welcoming. I mean, like I couldn't stay with them last tournament, and they had two other guys that stayed with them. It's just everybody's always willing to help each other out, and I think that's pretty different from a lot of like the bass boat side of things, and even other stuff. The community in kayak fishing is pretty special.
Yeah.
I think people want to see people do well.
Yeah, they want to see people catch fish.
They want to see people catch fish. They
not as big as theirs, but they still want to see them catch them.
But it's like if I'm traveling with Matt and Daniel and whatnot, and whoever's leading in the house after day one. I mean, like at Chick, I had an area that I caught fish, and I had some really good bites on Saturday. I just didn't convert. In practice, I caught that double. I caught that 21 and 18 on the same cast. So I was like, maybe this is my week. And long story short, Jordan had a better day than I did. And he goes, man, do you care if I, kind of hit your area first? And I said, knock yourself out, brother. Because, I mean, that's, to me, he would do the same thing for me. And so would Matt. And, as these things get so much more populated, having an area to yourself is a bonus, especially if it's, if it's got fish. I mean, you figured that out, Paul, when you fished Santee Cooper. I mean, I think you fished on top of people most of the day, and you kind of, had a nice little kind of sneaky ramp that not a ton of people knew about, but it still had a fair amount of fishermen there. But yeah,
I had some guy literally roll up beside me and start casting and then go right in front of me. It was wonderful. It was great.
Yeah, welcome to national tournament fishing.
Well, right. Well,
a lot of people don't realize that looking from the outside. Like if you've never traveled to a Hobie or to a big kayak fishing event, you're showing up to a lake that you've never been to before. So you're trying to figure out how to catch fish, number one. And then you've also got 199 other guys trying to do the same thing. And even though some of these lakes that we go to are rather large, a lot of times they don't have that much access. And you mentioned the Bassmaster Opens earlier, and there's 235 guys or whatever it is in those. Well, they still got a 250 on the back. 250?
No, yeah, it's 250 in the Opens.
Well, 250, but they still got a 250 on the back that they can make a 50-mile run if they want to, and you can use the whole lake. Us as kayak anglers, depending on access, we don't have that much of the lake that we can physically get to. So it crams a lot of people in there, and that really changes things. So it's not like you're just trying to find the fish, but you're trying to find something that's not going to get beat up too bad or didn't get beat up too bad for the guys that's been practicing for a week and a half. I mean, there's so much that goes into
and catching everything. Like
absolutely,
like 4 days straight, you see posts on the internet. 90 inches, 85 inches, 100 inches, blah, blah, blah. Tournament day that comes around, it's like, man, I had a great practice, but for the last 2 days, I've caught 2 fish.
We joke about winning practice. Daniel, excellent fisherman, and he tends to win practice. We give him a hard time.
Hey, that's been me too.
Well, I won practice at Chick after having that crazy day with those two. We practiced on Memorial Day, and I pretty much won practice on Chick. But I mean, the other thing I was going to bring up, which I talked to AJ with Hobie a little bit about earlier in the year, is like, I'm blessed that I have the financial resources to do this and not put a tremendous amount of thought in where I'm staying or what tournaments I fish or how much the entry fee is. But some of the other folks, man, it's like, you leave the house for a national tournament between food, equipment, fuel, VRBO, it's $1,000 minimum, and even if you're camping or doing this and that and the other, and like, Paul kind of jumped right in with us. We always like to have a steak dinner one night, and he brought phenomenal steaks, which, kudos to him. That was the highlight of the trip.
I'm gonna plug my boy Josh Quattlebaum.
Good stuff.
If you're in the Lake Murray area in South Carolina, Saluda area, South Carolina, JQC Farms, Josh Quattlebaum, grass fed, raises them. So them steaks were,
yeah.
And my boy Eric here cooked that shit up right. We thought we was gonna grill them, and I showed up, and they showed me the grill out back because Eric travels with a cast iron pan. He brings a cast iron.
True story.
I'm so glad, because if we would have had to grill them bitches out, we'd have been eating at 2:00 Saturday morning on that.
Hey, did he tell you about the VRBO owners tried to charge him extra because of the fire alarm or some crap went off?
We may or may not have been accused of setting that place on fire because
they thought there was a small fire.
Well, I had a little bit of a come to Jesus meeting with the folks at so VRBO outsources to another outfit called Evolve, and it's a little bit squirrely, to say the least. And so I get this nastygram saying that they were going to charge us, $150 extra cleaning fee, and that they were going to send all these pictures. And I was like, you know what? I was like, one thing we don't do is mess people's stuff up. And so if you remember, there was a knob on a cabinet that fell off that had probably been there for 73 years. And I think
that bitch was in there since the house was built.
Yeah, and we couldn't figure out how to get it back in. And so we said, whenever everybody left, kind of set it up on the kitchen counter. And then, when we were fixing those steaks, we had the door open, we had the air on, the smoke was going everywhere, and the smoke alarm was going off. So we pulled the smoke alarm off of, the wall. And of course, that's a violation of your agreement. And long story short, they charged us like $73 prior to everything for insurance for damages. And I'm like, well, what's this $73 insurance? Why you want to charge us another $150? Long story short, they charged me, and then they credited me back after we had some conversations. And I said, one of two things is going to happen. I said, you're going to take care of this $150, or I'm driving to talk to the owner. I said, sure.
I don't have a real job, and I have money. I got
all the time in the world. I said, you want me to drive back to South Carolina and have a talk with the owner? I'm happy to do it.
Well, what was great too when we were cooking those steaks, which was so awesome, and this is a testament to Eric, is I think, Matt, didn't somebody text you, or didn't somebody tell you, man, we smelled those steaks when they were staying across the road?
Yeah, they were staying across the street.
Yeah.
And they texted Jordan and said, maybe commented on Facebook and said that they smelled good.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
We posted a couple of pictures, and we had some guys staying across the street from us saying, hey, it's Santee Cooper, the wind blew like crazy. And I mean, it was white capping out there, and it was blowing straight towards those guys. I think those were some West Virginia guys. And they could smell the goodness. Let me tell you something, man. I've kind of pride myself. I think Paul is a good cook and likes to maneuver with spices and different stuff. And I kept giving him a hard time about screwing these steaks up. And man, those were fantastic. I mean, my local butcher here started carrying some Wagyu strips and Wagyu ribeyes. I mean, they look just like what you brought. They had so much marble in them; it looked like a spider web in that red. And I mean, that's just some good stuff. So,
and that leads me to something I didn't even think about till you just said this. But it something that you said when you travel. You said when y'all stay together, when y'all have a group, a lot of people go out and do this and that. But you said, when y'all have a house of group of people, you always cook out one night, and you typically bring steaks and cook steaks and have that, to have. And so there's two things. Let me back up because I just remembered something. So when I texted Jordan that, he says, "Hey man, just come stay at the house. We got room." And I was like, "Oh shit, hell yeah, great. Let me know how much. I'll do it." And I said, well, who's staying there? And he texted me y'all's names. We had never, the two of us, the three of us, me and y'all two had never met. He texted me the names. I'm like, holy shit. Like, I know who these people are. And I knew Matt from because Matt, I got into kayak fishing late December of 2020, 2021. So obviously I'd seen your name, got into KBN and all the stuff and seen your name. But I had known Eric from him and Jordan doing a bank fishing trip with kayak catfish. And that's where Pro Moderator came about. Because I believe fucking kayak catfish made like $2,500 that day that Eric moderated that channel. They were on there live with shitty fucking pixelated internet for 2 hours. Didn't catch a fish on camera. And I watched every fucking minute of it. Every minute. And you know why? Because Eric was the fucking funniest shit I have seen in a long time up to that point.
So the funny thing about that is Kayak Catfish came out and fished some of our weeknight events with us, and I don't know anything about YouTube, don't know anything about podcasts. I'm a little bit old school, and my undergrad's in marketing. I got an MBA, and I'm fairly quick study, and so, I start talking to Justin a little bit about what he's doing. I'm like, man, you're making money doing this? And he's kind of like, yeah. And we're talking to, trying to figure out how we can, use fishing as a tax write-off. And of course, with the YouTubers and content and all that stuff, we had a guy that fishes with us as an accountant. And that was kind of the first kind of thing together. And he was telling me about, how hard it was to go live and answer the questions because they're coming in so fast and everything else. And I was like, man, I was like, you need a moderator. I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I said, let's give it a whirl. And so the first one we did, he came to the house, we grilled steaks and we just probably shot the breeze for, a little while. And we had, I don't know, $400, $500 or $600, come through the super chat. And at that point, people were calling him donations. He was calling them donations. And, I love the guy to death, but I mean, he's, YouTube takes a very generous portion of that money. And he's trying to do this for a living and he looks at it as his business. But long story short, we did it and his audience seemed to take to me, and it's hard. That is a hard thing to do because you've got 500-600 people in that chat. You've got sidebars going on. You've got trolls, all this stuff, Paul. I mean, it's just, it's not easy. And so we kind of had some chemistry and people were asking me stupid stuff and they were talking about, stuff with catfishing and whatnot. And then he said, man, why don't you go fishing with me? And I'll never forget that. That was literally New Year's Eve of probably 2020 or 2021.
Yeah. No, it was 2020 or 2021. Yeah.
And people, and what was crazy, and we didn't put any thought into it whatsoever, but it just so happened it was New Year's Eve, and Jordan could come out there with us, and he was toying around starting a YouTube channel, and
I subscribed that motherfucker and still ain't seen no videos.
Yeah, he struggled with the GoPro system set up. I mean, Matt knows this. I mean, he's a damn bull in a china shop, and I mean. Matt is very organized. If you look at his tackle, I mean, it looks like he might have a condition or two when it comes to OCD. I mean, he's got tackle box. I'm reasonably organized. I mean, it's like, man, I don't even want to look in there. It's just too pretty, I mean, he's got
Jordan had a fucking bag.
Jordan got shit from 6 years ago in the bottom of his kayak, but
Jordan is the Matt Robertson of
that's right.
kayak fishing. Like if he had a personality on the Bassmaster Elite Series, it's Matt Robertson. Matt Robertson, like when he won on Lake Cherokee here in the Opens, and he literally fished out of a Walmart bag. Like he went and bought, he like got a bunch of stuff stolen before that. So like he went and bought a bunch of shit from Walmart and like threw it in a bag, and that's what he fished out of. That's Jordan.
We'll tell you a story about Memorial Day. So we put in at a very sketchy ramp way upriver on Chickamauga, and we had our motors, and we had this terrific plan, And we were so thrilled when we drive into this sketchy ramp. It's a really nice neighborhood, feeling good about not getting burglarized. We fished from about 6 to 2, get back to the ramp, and I've got a soft cover on my truck, and his truck was parked right next to mine. I mean, like, you could touch his truck from my truck. Well, the crackheads just blistered up his bed, and he had so much shit in the back of his truck. He was like, he goes, man, I don't think they got anything. It was about 4 days later, he figured out not only did they get some shit, they got all of his fishing stuff. He had 5 or 6 reels, he had a bunch of lures and all this
bunch of line too, damn bunch of line.
But
what's funny is it wasn't no quick job. Like they cut a fucking square. They cut the square out. Like it wasn't no just slash and grab. They
He said some of his shit was sitting in the parking lot next to the truck. So like,
there was a boot and a shoe and this and that. And I'm like, man, we need to survey the parking lot, make sure we pick stuff up, because I mean, it was just like. And I'm thinking, I know if they got his truck, my truck's wrecked too. And my truck was just like it was. And I've started rolling my top up and taking everything out of the back. I'm like, you know what? I want you to know there's nothing back here. So, if you want to bust a window and see what's in the cab, knock yourself out. But it's like, not getting into politics or anything else, but they just, these criminals aren't getting in trouble. And it's like, they're these boat ramps are in the middle of nowhere, and they see
it's
it.
hard. It's hard to police a boat ramp. And
it is.
Yeah, it's very hard to police a boat ramp. And when we roll up, what's different, one of the huge differences between boat fishing, kayak fishing is when those guys roll up in a 22 foot bass boat, all their shit, their garage, shit is in the boat.
Yeah.
With the kayak stuff, on a tournament especially, we bring a lot of stuff. If you get to practice, you bring a lot of stuff to figure out, what's going to work.
Yeah.
Well, you can't necessarily bring all your shit on the kayak.
No.
It doesn't fit. And so you have to put it in your truck. And that is, I was a police officer back in the day. People look in vehicles and they choose which ones they're going to break into, and they choose the ones that have shit in it that looks of value.
Yeah. And
when you're kayak fishing, I mean, Drew Gregory rolls around with like 8 kayaks on a trailer behind like a Toyota Subaru or something.
Dude, we've got a boat ramp here. We've got a boat ramp here in Northeast Tennessee. In upper Northeast Tennessee, you've probably got two places that you might have a legit chance at catching a 10-pounder. And one of those places is super backwoods, notorious for people shit getting broke into. And honestly, when I go there, and it was a big deal for a long time. And they actually ended up setting up and catching a guy out of there probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But it's still an issue because it's in the middle of nowhere. And I've got to the point where I do like Eric. I leave my doors unlocked. Like I make sure there's just nothing in the truck, make sure the bed cover's unlocked. But I mean,
that way they ain't fucking nothing up. At least they go in and there ain't nothing to take. They take some change or whatever. So that's crazy.
I'd rather go through my truck than have to replace a windshield,
Yeah, especially after fishing. Think about it on a Sunday. You fish for 2 days straight. You get back at the ramp at 4 o'clock on Sunday, and you got your driver's side windows busted out, and you got an 8-hour drive back home, and it's going to be raining the whole time. You ain't getting that shit replaced.
You figure with the way things are now, and I'm a big proponent, Matt's seen, I like to travel light as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you're using a motor to practice, you got your motor and your battery, and so like, on Sunday, if you're packed up to go after you fish, which many times you are, you got your 65 quart Orion cooler in there. You got, you've got your motor, you got your battery, you got whatever rods and reels you don't think you're going to use that particular day. And so I've been fortunate, I hadn't been burglarized, but I mean, it happens. Way too much, and you talk about a sick feeling.
I mean, it's a worry
thing.
every time,
Yeah.
especially like what Eric's saying. You pack up on Saturday night to leave on Sunday after a Hobie's over with. Yeah, I mean, I worry about it every time, and there's just no good way.
And that's the thing too, because you're parking on the side of the road at a bridge, or these remote ramps and stuff in kayak fishing. Where in bass boat worlds, they're launching from the same place, and there's people there. They're big ramps. There's a lot of people there. Just in general. Taking a step back, Matt, what do you have coming up? Like, what national trails are you fishing? What are you looking to fish for? What local stuff do you have coming up that you're in a race for, or looking to get the TOC? What do you have coming up fishing?
Man, I kind of like I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty new on the kayak deal, and last year, 2020 was the first time I fished a full year. And I fished full local stuff. And then last year, 2021, I fished the one Hobie on Watts Bar and qualified for that TOC. Then fished the TOC, done pretty well in it. So I was like, man, I need to fish some more of these events, So this year I kind of made a little bit of a sacrifice on the local stuff in order to be able to travel to more national events. So, I fished, I think, 4 local or semi-local events this year. And some of the night fishing stuff's kind of starting up, so I may hit a couple of those. I'm going to hit the Bass Nation Championship on Chick in August. And then on the Hobie side, we're signed up for Susky. We're going to be going up there next month, I think. I hadn't really looked too much into it just yet, but I'm kind of on that. I need one more good tournament. I need another good tournament to get back into the TOC. And, I was hoping it wouldn't come down to Susky, because I feel like I'm a little bit better on the lake than I am the river. I just don't fish the river as much. But, anything possible. But depending on how Susky goes, I may try and pick up Dardanelle at the very end of the year, just kind of see how things go. But we're kind of getting to that point where things are winding down. I'm starting to kind of have an eye towards the fall and hunting season, but I've got some fishing stuff still left to do. But there's definitely more of it behind us than ahead of us.
Yeah. Are you not planning on fishing? I can't remember what river it is, but the Wisconsin, isn't it? Are you not fishing that one?
Wolf and Fox?
Yeah, Wolf and Fox.
I don't think so. I think if I pick up something
after
extra,
Susky, so does Susky maybe necessitate if you go up there? What you do on that?
Honestly, if I suck at Susky, which honestly, if I can put myself, I'm going to be relying on Jordan and Eric to some degree on that tournament, because they're, they are river guys. They love it. Now, I fished the river, a fair amount. But they are river guys. So I feel like if I can, either rely on them to do an A to B float, that way I can have somebody to get me to a vehicle or whatever. But I feel like if I can get in an area, I can catch fish. I don't care if it's a river, I don't care if it's the ocean, or I don't care if it's a lake. I feel like I can catch them. But I feel like if that doesn't go well, I think Dardanelle, from what little bit I've looked at it, would probably be a better option for me if I need to try and get some last minute points.
Well, if you need homework on Dardanelle, just go check out Fish the Moment, because probably a quarter of his information is on Dardanelle. But you do also talk about catching fish. You at Santee, you were fishing an area that to my knowledge, the people I talk to and seeing, and obviously talking to you, you're like the only one in the area that you were fishing on Santee, and you caught good fish. The problem was you lost the fish that you needed in that area.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you.
That's something to say to what you just said about being able to find fish and catch fish. Well, to find fish, it was one thing to get them in the boat, because you're in an area. I think you said you didn't see a lot of people, and I don't know a lot of people that were in that area on Santee either. So that's pretty awesome.
Dude, Santee, we were so close to that being the best tournament of the year. We were
Half a cooter
so
hair off.
close because, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we had an awful stretch of weather, it seemed like, on the first few tournaments. And the Bassmaster Elite Series had, just the weekend before, absolutely smashed them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a big cold front that moved in, I think, Thursday night or Friday.
I
had
Y'all
a great
that lake was angry as fuck Friday afternoon.
Dude, I had a great practice on Thursday in that area. I ended up fishing, and I marked a bunch of bedfish and stuff, and I had a few different areas. Well, when I put in there on Saturday, the water temperature had dropped like 8 degrees from what it was on Thursday when I fished. And not only that, but the water had dropped and the water level had dropped. And all those bedfish had pulled off, and it made it a lot tougher, and it should have been a lot better tournament. But the reason I ended up where I ended up was the Elite Series. All of those guys, you know, if you watch the final day, all of them were on the upper lake on Lake Marion. And I knew, you know, because those guys were concentrated in a couple of areas. Our kayak guys and girls are super resourceful. They watched a lot of that, and if not all of it, you know, at least all the big guys. So, you know, I knew that there was going to be more people on the upper lake than the lower lake. And I had a buddy of mine that lived down there. And from what he was telling me, the lower lake was running a little bit behind of what the upper lake was. The upper lake was full-blown spawn the weekend before. So I felt like the lower lake would probably be hitting at the right time. So it was so close to working out and being a good tournament. And like you said, I lost a big fish that would have been my 5th right at the last minute on Saturday. It had been in the top 10. Then I lost 2 keeper fish on Sunday, you know, in the last couple hours that would have put me back in check range. So if I catch any one of those 3, you know, it'd be a little bit different story. But, you know, that's the way it goes.
And I fish at the southern end of I had 2 ramps. I had one at I literally crossed the bridge at 3:00 on Friday, and that was when fishing was done. Mainly because I had to go pick up y'all's fucking steaks. That took like 2.5, 3 hours out of my time. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
You, sir.
I came down to have a good time. But if I wasn't so, it had been a while since I'd fished topwater, and even longer since I fished a frog. Like I would have had 70 something inches if my sorry ass fishing ass had caught those 3 frog fish, because I'd have had 4. I'd have been up there and I'd have gone back to that same place, but the other day I wanted to go check something out. So that southern end of the lake, it had some fish in it that were up and willing to bite. But you know, where I was protected from the wind. And then I tried to fish down in there in the wind. It was tough, man. I mean, the water was milk chocolate. So
I only talked to one other guy on the kayak that whole time, and he cut a check that tournament. Like me and him basically had the same tournament. He just landed his fish, and I forget what place he was in, but it was probably, you know, 10th to 15th. I don't know.
Because you said that 5th fish you lost at the boat, you said was like 21 inches. I mean, it's a big fish.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 20-inch fish. I don't know. I mean, it could have been whatever, but he jumped. That was that first day where we had those 30-mile-an-hour winds, and
it was rough.
He bit with about five minutes left. And when I set the hook on him, you know, I'm pulling on him, you know, leaning into him, and I get off the pedals to stand up and land it because I didn't really have all that much line out. You know, it's halfway back to the boat. And when I stand up to land him, that wind starts pushing me back. You know, it's ripping 30 miles an hour at that second. So not only am I leaning on the fish, but the wind's blowing me back, putting even more pressure on it. And I've got like a 5-pound fish that jumps 2 foot out of the water, 10 foot away from my boat. I felt like I could damn near reach out and grab it. So I got a pretty good image of what that fish looked like. Yeah. And, you know, I'll be honest, I was pretty disappointed after that tournament, you know, because I felt like I was really close to having a really good tournament. But when I got to, you always think about the ones you didn't get or the ones that you messed up on. But, you know, as I was driving home on that one and the days after, it kind of takes me a day or two to process whatever goes on in the tournament, because when you're in the moment, you're fishing and the weekend goes by so quick, you know, you don't really get to digest it all till later. And I got to thinking about, you know, some of the good decisions I made, because like on Saturday, you know, I had 2 good areas that I'd found in practice. And, you know, I got down to about an hour and a half left on Saturday, and I had 2 fish. And I'd fished everything I'd practiced on, and it just wasn't happening. All those fish got pulled out. I couldn't re-find them. And there was another area I'd practiced that was about a 45-minute one-way pedal to get to. Mind you, an hour and a half left.
Down. The other way, too. The other
direction from the ramp. So I'm going to go 45 minutes one way, the wrong way.
Yeah. And then paddle back against it. Yeah.
Right. So I was like, fuck it. I'm going to do it. I got to at least give myself a chance, you know. So I'm just pedaling as hard as I could pedal, and I'm going across this big flat. And anybody that's listening to this has ever fished Santee, you've got so much just dead water, flat, nothing, you know. And I'm going across one of these flats, and I notice it gets just a foot or 2 deeper. And then I see one random ass piece of brush in the middle of this flat. And I'm going like 4 miles an hour, wind at my back, you know, as fast as I could go. And I'm like, I see that brush. I grab my rod real quick, and I just get off the pedals, and I flip in there. And by the time I go to pick up on it, it's almost behind me, and it's got tension to it. So I like half-ass hook set, you know. And when I pull up on it, this thing comes up and jumps. And I was like, it's a big one, you know. And I get it in. It was like a 21 or 21-something inch fish. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we got a chance, you know. And at that time, we probably had 45 or 50 minutes left, and went to the dock I was trying to get to and flipped in there, caught another one. And I was like, I got 4. Shit, I could get a limit. This has been a terrible day, you know. But I made that decision to paddle over there.
And so for folks listening, it was a tough day 1. Now day 2,
dude, it was tough. Yeah.
Day two, some people absolutely fucking wrecked them. But that Saturday was tough. So 75 inches got you, I think, in the top 20.
Yeah, I had 70-some inches on 4 fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I lost that one at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I made that. I was thinking about the lost fish and the stuff that eats at you, but where I was getting at with that is I made a really good decision to do the tough thing and go the opposite direction 45 minutes to only be able to fish 45 minutes, and that worked out. You know, it gave me a chance. So there was a lot of stuff I'd done well, so you can't get too hung up on the lost fish and stuff.
And that's another thing with the kayak fishing too. You know, you think about pedaling 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour to a spot to fish in the last, 2 or 3 hours of the day. And you get there, in the back of your mind, you're like, shit, if I go in 45 minutes, most of us are going to cover 2 to 3 miles pedaling. Without a motor, you're going to be 2 or 3 miles, and you think about it in the back of your mind, like, shit, if I go 2 or 3 more miles, I got an 8-mile pedal back against the wind to get back.
It took me an hour and a half. It took me an hour and a half to get back from right there to the ramp. And then where I was fishing from the house was like an hour away from the house. So, I mean, it was like every day I was getting back late as shit. But, I mean,
you got back late as fuck.
That's just where it ended up.
You know, so, the thing about what he is saying, which I really like the way the Hobies have chosen to do it, is, you can fish to the buzzer, and you're not on the hook to be back at a certain period of time. And I mean, I really think that's the right way to do it, because you can make on the water moves that maybe others wouldn't make, that sometimes pay off and sometimes don't pay off. I can remember fishing the Seminole Hobie on Sunday, had a lackluster Saturday, but I was having a really good Sunday, and I was about to run out of time and wanted an upgrade or two, and just made Daniel saw me, Pro Neighbor's like, I know where you're going. And I just started pumping it, and I made a run and got to an area, and probably had 15, 20 minutes to fish it, but ended up catching a couple fish, which made, a top 25 finish. And, with this, as difficult as it is to get points and finishes and stuff like that, I mean, it's, it allows anglers to take the approach. I'm not giving up until 2:00 or 3:00, whenever lines out is, because if you catch, you can, I've done it. I did it at Seminole last year on Saturday. I caught a fish at 3:00 in seconds, and I took like 8 pictures of it. And my 9th picture was 3:01 and the 8th one was decent enough to count, and it's just like, and that may have been the difference of making the TOC that particular year. So it's
you
really
gotta be willing to grind it out to the buzzer, like no matter what. If you think you need to make a move, you need to do it. Whatever that gut instinct is, you got to go with it.
I want to come back to that from a tournament side, and I want to come back to that real quick. But Eric, what do you have like? Do you think you're going to be able to sneak into the TOC this year? I know you got the Tin Cat Trophy behind you, the local tournaments. What's coming up for you nationally? What's coming up for you locally? Go through that, and then we're going to come back because I know Eric's got to leave early because he's got an early flight out. But talk about that, and then we're going to come back and talk about grinding out those last days with some quote-unquote etiquette for how we fish around people who are winning versus not winning. But just to throw that out there. But Eric, what do you have coming up nationally? What do you have coming up? Because I think you're only fishing the Hobies. But what do you have coming up, and where do you see yourself finishing? And show us your nice, beautiful trophy in the back.
Well, I got a few back here. I don't know what all you can see, but a couple of Tin Cat local trails. This one's probably one I'm most proud of because I won Angler of the Year in 2020 in Tin Cat, and that's beating Jordan and Pro Neighbor and some other good fishermen, and fishing for soldiers. I got a 2nd place trophy. I won Chick when I caught a 10-pounder. I had 62 and change and 3 fish that particular day, but I had a 24 3/4 as part of those 3.
Dude, a double digit on tournament day.
On tournament day, yeah.
Oh, that's when you want to catch them right there.
Matter of fact, there were 3 10-pounders caught that day, and 2 of the guys that caught them along with me, I know them pretty good, and they were like, they for some reason, it was April, it was perfect. And when I hooked this fish, somebody had threw out a couple of Christmas trees, and it swam through one of them and moved it. And I was like, this can't be. This can't be. I said, this can't be a bass. And then I saw it, and I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
Well, I landed ungracefully. It was a shit show. I misnetted it 6 times, and I finally got my hand in my mouth. And I had the death grip on it. And I was like, I've never caught a 10-pounder, but I said, this is not a 10-pound fish. I don't know what one is. And Pro Neighbor broke his native rudder cable at the launch. I call him. He's got a scale. I was going to get pictures of this fish. As I'm pedaling through it, I was fishing real shallow, and I caught my fin on the bottom, and it ripped the fin off, and I had one fin. He's like a mile away. I'm crippled. I got this poor fish on fish grips. He's coming at 0.5 miles an hour, and I'm going 0.5 miles an hour. So, an hour later, we hook up, and we get the photos, and the fish swims away. I mean, it was.
You said you had this bitch on fish grips. Did you have it on fish grips also with your hand hanging out, holding on to it? Or
I had taken 7 pictures of it on the board, and I thought, you know what, I trust the fish grips, so they worked beautifully. I didn't lose the fish, but for me, it's funny, I fish a lot, and sometimes I get my name on lists to qualify for things, and thinking, how did that happen? And I think I actually qualified 2 ways for this bass Chickamauga event. I fished the tournament he fished in, and I fished, I'm working on positive thinking, and I fished clean. I caught a bunch of fish. I had a limit about the same time Matt did in the morning, and I was catching them on top water. I just didn't get any quality bites. I had 73 inches. I think I come in 16th in the Bass Nation event, but I came in 2nd in the Cass State in 2021 in the top 15, got an invite into the Bass State Nation deal at Chick in August, and so I'll fish that with Matt. Going to Susky, and this is going to sound strange, and I don't care to say it. That's the one tournament that I think I could win. If it fishes anything like it fished last year, I know how to catch smallmouth. I know how to fish rivers. That is a tournament where most people catch a limit, but you have got to catch quality limit to compete. And
big smallies.
That suits me. That suits how I like to fish.
Absolutely.
And last year I think I finished in the top 25 at Susky, but on Saturday I had two 12-inch fish in my 5-fish limit, and I had two monsters that shook loose on Saturday, and then Sunday I had like 95 or 96 inches, which was in the top 4 or 5. And we all practiced together. We all fished similar stretches of river. What I don't know about Susky is, the water conditions, the water level, and I think it can fish drastically different based on water level. So my fingers are crossed it'll fish similar to last year. There'll be no sneaking in TOC for me. I'm going to have a top 3 finish, and that's how I'm going to fish the last ones that I fish.
Jordan, you can do that, I mean, like
I
you said,
when I qualified,
nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose, right?
When I qualified for TOC the first year they had it, I qualified with a 5th place finish at Guntersville, and fished clean. I caught fish the way I like to catch them. I picked a place where I had to myself. Josh Stewart won that event. I could have easily come in second, based on the bites that I got. Steve Owens had a career day on Sunday and had like 102 inches and jumped like 35 spots and finished second or third, which is great guy. I love that. You remember stuff like that. He blasted him in the grass on a damn underspin swim bait, caught 5 over 20, and you may go your whole fishing career and not do that, especially in a tournament. So I know it's there to finish in the top tier, and I've beat those guys that I'm competing against, and so I'm going to fish
river fishery too, which is
it's a perfect tournament for him.
Yeah.
It really is.
And last year we kind of reflect back on where we had the most fun, and obviously a lot of times that's where you've caught the best fish. But Seminole, oddly enough, is very river friendly because you can fish the Flint or the Chattahoochee, or you can fish the main lake. We fished the Flint River, and that was a place where on Saturday I had the bites to really compete and just didn't land the fish. Last year was a lot different than this year. Last year I fished like mad. I fished consistent. I had some quality finishes. I didn't really have a tremendous amount of stress in tournaments. And even my worst tournament was Hartwell. At Hartwell, I had 2 big fish on Saturday. And Hartwell, I think 80 inches was like top 2 or 3 on Saturday. And I would have had 83 or 4 inches if I'd landed those fish. I had one on a buzzbait come straight up and come off, and I had one on a crankbait shake loose. But that's part of it. This year, I didn't get a damn bite at Fork. I didn't get a damn bite at Toledo Bend. I fished in the same area as Pro Neighbor, and he wrecked him on Saturday, and I didn't get a bite. And we, like I said, our fishing styles are much different. I caught a 20. What would I catch? A 22 or 21 3/4 in practice at Toledo. I've still caught some big fish.
You caught a big.
But Santee Cooper was just dreadful for me. And Jordan's within 6 feet of me first thing in the morning. He's done caught 2 fish on a methylate, or however you say that floating worm, that big old orange floating worm, and that gas dirty water. I'm
methylate.
Hey, he can thank me for that one.
Look, that's a lot of vowels to put together for a country person. Methylate. Hey, let me ask you something real quick, Eric, before you get into your local stuff. Why the fuck does it look like you got on your head that damn? Do y'all remember the Sandlot? Matt, you younger than me and him. You younger. Look, pro hashtag pro's old enough to be your grandpa. But do y'all remember Smalls from Sandlot?
Oh, with the big old bill on his hat.
Yeah, why the fuck Eric
Yeah, I
look
got
like
you.
he got a why the fuck he
I
look
think it
like he
just-
stole Small's hat?
It
with
was
that
the. I think it
big-ass
was the
bill?
angle. I think it's the angle.
I mean, this is a pretty
Matt,
pretty
We
streamlined
here,
hat.
Matt. We are here to fuck with him. Don't give actual reasons why.
Hey, man,
So,
I'm just gonna help you out.
Eric #pro is now #pro Smalls.
Pro Smalls, that'll work. You're killing me, Smalls. No,
You're killing me, Smalls.
so
Look, hey Matt, all you need to do is give him a black eye at Susky, and let's take a picture of this exact angle so we can use as something. So, what's your
Hey,
local trails
I'm-
look like?
a man
Hold
can
on,
get a man can
I'm
get
a
a black eye
mailman.
Susky.
He's talking about the scent. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
If you fall out of your kayak, which is very possible at Susky, you could fall on a rock and get a black eye. You talk about fishing with your head on a swivel. If you ain't paying attention, you're going to wreck your shit. I promise you. I love Joe McElroy to death, but in practice, he tried out a lynx and he was upside down in about 10 minutes. He lost a whole bunch of shit.
Look,
not doing
I
that.
don't know Joe McElroy, but if you weigh more than 150 pounds, you best not take your ass out on the Hobie Links to go kayak fishing in a tournament.
I don't know his exact weight, but I don't think he would make that weight. So,
look, Matt Millard will be safe on the Links.
probably.
Eric,
Nah.
you, me, Jordan Marshall, Ryan Lambert's big old fat ass. We ain't on no Links on no big water or no moving water.
No.
That bitch has got to be a pond with no ripples.
But to finish up schedule wise, Fox and Wolf. So Jordan and I left Broken Bow a day earlier than we had initially planned. That's a pretty long trip, and we hustled home after we fished a couple hours on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
That's another tournament where I didn't fish as poorly as my results were. I had some really good bites late in the day. I kind of figured something out and just didn't catch them. And I'm notoriously good at landing fish and not missing fish. And it's just like, it's been crazy this year how many fish I've missed. But 10 cat wise, I'm currently within the qualifiers of the state tournament. I think it's the top 8 plus the directors. We've got 2 more local events, one on Melton Hill, one in the river, and then the classic. And I'll likely qualify for state through 10 cat. And I think those guys, those local directors here, Andrew Dodson, Steve Owens, and just Burkhart, the guys in this general area, I mean, they do a really nice job. It's not they don't get a lot of props for what they do, but they do a nice job. And like our guys pulled back money and they got us a house for the team on Kentucky Lake for the state tournament. And we're really hoping that Jordan, gets in with us. It's just like Matt. I mean, it's, there was a time where there wasn't enough tournaments and now there's too many. You can't fish everything you want to fish. You can't
do it all.
You want to support your local trail. Local trails are trying to get smarter and piggybacking off the national events. And it's kind of like Saturday, we had 3 tournaments going on at one time. We had 10 cat was the 3 fish tournament. NTKA and Bass Nation was kind of a joint event, but not really. They were 3 separate pots, 3 separate entries, and it worked out. And that's what's really good about Daniel Davis and Steve and these guys collaborating together to say, why don't we do this together and get more participation? And I mean, I'm telling you, man, it's impressive to look at the sponsors and what these people are doing. I mean, my sponsor, he's great, limited as far as some of the other sponsors out there, as far as what they have available to the anglers. But I mean, you look at what Dugout's doing. I mean, Frontier is my sponsor. He's great to me. Gets me what I need from the kayak specific piece of the puzzle. But, I mean, it's impressive to see how this has evolved. And I think you see the participation, you see these tournaments going back to the same lakes, and they're working with these Chamber of Commerces and, Fish Dayton or Jefferson City, I think, was a big host for that. I mean, hell, they had beer tickets for us at Angelo's at check-in for the tournament we fished on Saturday. And I think we might have got food discounts and this and that. And they had us a nice area on the patio, and they had a PA system so we could stand up there and go through the winners and all that good stuff. So I mean, it's cool to see the growth. It's cool to see, the options, but if you got a full-time job, you've got responsibilities with kids and things like that, you really have to be disciplined to say, okay, what can I get away with and still keep everybody happy and afford it and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. And that's been like, for me, I fished Santee this year. So I own my own business, started it in March of 2020 in the middle of COVID. And, we didn't get our stuff to start making money until September of 2020. And so, like, my whole thing is I want to fish more national tournaments, but I've got 2 kids. I've got a wife that works full time. I've got my own business. I headed down to Santee as early as I could. No pre-fishing.
yeah.
I grew up in South Carolina. I fished Santee. I had never thrown a bass lure in Santee. Now, I grew up catfishing, but we ain't down there to catch no damn catfish. And going back to all the local trails, because we do have a lot of that, it's the Wild Wild West of kayak fishing right now. All the major trails are opens. And so you're going to get that. We all know it. There's going to be a professional trail that comes about where these folks that are going to all these, they're hitting the local trails when they're there. They're hitting the national trails. They're fishing all these other ones. There's gonna be a split at some point where you have these people that have to choose, and it's going to come down when you're a professional. So you take the elites or BPT or anything like that. Those guys fish those trails, and that's what they fish. And if they can fit something here and there, they will. But that's what they're going to fish, and we're going to get to that. And Matt's gone. Were you good on all your local stuff where you think we're going to fish? You got anything else to add on that?
Yeah, our season's winding down. We've got a local lake here in Oak Ridge called Melton Hill, which I fished Melton Hill last year, and I saw some incredibly quality smallmouth where I fished. I didn't catch them, and so I'm going to fish that same area this year. That's a interesting lake. It's full of muskie. And so you're liable to catch a giant muskie out of that lake too, which is always a thrill if you're fortunate enough to get a hold of one of those. And then the second tournament is basically a honey hole / radius type tournament where it's moving waters. And so I'll probably go back down there where I caught that big spot and shoot for 3 big spots. And if I catch that right, it'll be hard to catch because there's some big ones that lurk around down there. And then the last piece is the classic and then state tournament. Yeah. I may do Dardanelle.
He's doing Dardanelle. He's going. We know it.
Well, I'm when I say I really feel like I could win Susky, I believe that, but I can't compete with these guys like Ewing and Justin and Matt and these guys that are really good at electronics and that are looking at offshore stuff. There's certain places I know I can compete and do well. And for me, if I'm in the top 20 in that field, if I'm in the top 10%, that's really good. Mm-hmm. But that particular tournament and even Seminole with, it's funny when you get one tournament under your belt at a given fishery and you feel like you've got an understanding of how things work. I'm comfortable going to Susky with a game plan based on results from last year. And if I would have listened to Jordan and Daniel sooner, I probably would have done even better than I did. I don't care to tell you this, I caught 9 of my 10 keepers on that spro rat I like to throw up there. And not many people throw that. And that's typically a lure that you're going to get a bigger bite on. And when I say I lost a couple of big ones on that Saturday, I lost a couple of big ones on that Saturday.
Hey, speaking of that, I gave you a Spro Little John microchip square, but have you thrown that big?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've thrown. I mean, there's, Matt's a little bit like me. He's a tackle junkie to a degree. I mean, there's hardly anything that I'm going to see that I haven't tried or know.
Have you lost it?
I still have
lost it. Okay.
I still have it.
When I give people, especially crankbaits.
And you gave me a chatterbait to try as well.
Yeah.
I still got
That's my boy.
chatterbait.
Yep.
Yeah. So I gave all y'all chatterbaits. That's my boy Damien, stretching lines. Look, I give people lures and I ask them, have you fished it? They go, yeah. I said, did you lose it? And if they say no, I'm like, you ain't fishing that shit right. I can buy a $26 damn whatchamacallit fucking jerk bait. I don't buy lures afraid to lose them. Like I buy lures to fish, and if I lose that bitch, you know what? I'm either gonna go buy another one or I'm gonna find something else to fish with. So look, I expect next time.
If I'm fishing in less than, let's just call it 10 feet of water, maybe 8 feet of water,
shallow, less than 10 feet shallow.
If I'm fishing shallow, which is 99.9% of what I do,
Eric's water don't go deeper than 8 feet to begin with.
I don't.
So Eric can't swim. He's like, if I can't see the bottom,
I want to stand up in that water and not be over my head. But no, I throw that Spro rock crawler is probably the deepest lure I throw, and I'll lose those from time to time. But some of those shallower running crankbaits, I do what you're not supposed to do. I just reel all the way down to the tip and typically shake it loose if if I get it hung up. But that's the one cool thing about kayak fishing. If you pay a little bit of attention to what's going on around you, losing lures is not a huge deal, because you can either go get them or not, and it's and sometimes in the late late winter, early spring, I love to crank, and and I'm moving and shaking, and that's the time when you typically get something buried somewhere that you just can't get it out. And there have been times where I'm like, God almighty, there's $50 worth of crankbaits down there, and I won $22 for third place. Local tournament. I was like, that's a small victory right there.
Man,
I don't lose many at all either. You're talking about not losing lures. I bet I've got a 3/8 jackhammer that I bet has caught close to 40 or more river smallmouth. Like it's got sentimental value at this point. I keep throwing it. So I'm sure I'll lose it. How I haven't lost it in the river, I'll never know.
But as Eric said, I think it's easier to go get those lures from the kayak. You're closer to the
100%.
water. You can get shallower. We ain't worried about breaking off a $1,500 lure unit that if you break it off, you're not getting another one. We don't have those aspects of it. So that's true. All right. So Eric's got to leave, and this might go longer, and Eric might have to drop off because we got Matt here, and I'm the jabberhammer, even though I haven't been hammering shit this year. But I do want to back up to what I talked about earlier, because we have two anglers that fish the Hobie BOS, which is, probably the number one competitive trail that people are fishing right now with the TOC. And this comes up a good bit, and you hear it, especially on KBN, where somebody's in the top 5. They're fishing for a win. And somebody goes, oh, you're so-and-so. Let me move out of your way. It's the etiquette on the water, right? That's what we're getting at. But I think there's a line here. Let's say this person is fishing for a win. Eric, Matt, you're fishing for the TOC. It's the last tournament of the year. It's the last tournament you can fish of the year. It might not be the last one, but the last one you can fish. What? Like, how does this work out? Like, they come to you and be like, hey, man, I found this spot Thursday in practice. They haven't been fishing there on Saturday. They come Sunday and be like, hey, man, I'm fishing for first. And I'm like, can I have this spot? Now I know we're going to simplify this because we don't have a ton of time, but in general, maybe you're fishing for big fish. Maybe you caught a 22-incher out of here, and there's a chance to win $500 or $600 with big fish off of this. What do y'all think? What's your mindset when you run into this situation? Because I'd be willing to bet y'all have run into this situation on one end or the other. Like, what does that look like? Do you tell them to fuck off? I'm fishing for TOC. Fuck your first place. I mean, because in the kayaking world, let me go with this. In the kayak world, people will back off a lot. You hear that a lot. So-and-so backed off because they, and of course, I guess it was a couple months ago, somebody was in like 70th place and blah, blah. It doesn't fucking matter, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. What I'm getting at is you got a place with a big fish that's going to pay for your travel, or you're fishing for the TOC and you have somebody that's in the top 10 that's fishing for a win. How do we handle this on the water? Like, what does that look like? Have y'all run into it? What do y'all think? What's your thoughts on that?
I'll go first and kind of leave it with you guys. So I've had about 3 that I could probably put my finger on. And, I have, so I don't care to even tell you who it was. Ron Champion, who is an excellent fisherman. Last year at TOC at Eufaula, we practiced at a ramp together on the Sunday before. I spent the whole week. I probably did more pre-fishing for that tournament than I did any tournament I've ever fished. I was there the whole week. And I ended up fishing where I caught my biggest fish in practice, and it was a real crowded ramp. It was way north on the lake, and that was a 3-day event. And so you kind of needed to spread yourself out a little bit, Mm-hmm. And the first day of the event, I think it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday was really crowded at my ramp, and I think everybody that caught big fish in practice caught them all in that same area. And I got a small limit, and I was like, what, I'm gonna go back and go where I practiced on Sunday. And honestly, it was me and Ron. And Ron had a good Saturday, and he kind of big timed me at the ramp and was like, "Hey man, had a big Saturday. Here's kind of what I want to do. I would appreciate it if you would kind of leave this." I mean, he initiated it. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Hey man, no problem." Because he was in a much better position than I was. But what was interesting, we were the only 2 that launched there that morning. And then he did a 2-ramp pattern that day, and I beat the hell out of his area once he left. And then Christine Fisher and Josh Stewart ended up at that ramp, and they beat the shit out of his area too. And so I don't know, I think there's a mental side to that piece of the puzzle, and you don't know definitively who's fished what area, when they fished it. You got all these like minds alike. At the Bassmaster,
technology changes spots. Like there's that's a big part of it too. So
I went and fished the Bassmaster Kayak Classic in South Carolina, and Pendergraph, who's a friend of mine, and I didn't know he was around the corner, and I kind of went around the corner and he was there, and that's a motor friendly trail, and he's basically fishing out of a tiny bass boat in his old town. He's standing up with a trolling motor, and he's covering water. And I didn't know it was him at first. And I'd had a horrifically terrible practice and went to a ramp I didn't practice at. And he just asked, he said, "Eric," he said, "would you mind if I, have this area?" And I said, "Man, it's yours." And I just motored somewhere else. I don't know, man. It's a catch-22. I think if you got some skin in the game, that if you have a chance to cash, you should stand your ground. I think if you don't have a chance to cash, you might want to put yourself in that other angler's shoes and say, "You know what? The flip side of it is you pay an entry, $265, and you want to get the most out of your, out of your deal." I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you don't own the water. They don't own the water. You see these guys, and Matt, we talk about it with these bass boaters. I mean, shit, sometimes, they could walk on each other's boats. They're fishing a ledge, or they're fishing a culvert, or they're fishing somewhere where, they arrived at the same spot and they practice there, and they just agree to fish together. I've seen Christine and other competitors, take turns casting in a culvert on Kentucky Lake, and they sit there for 8 hours. And so I don't know the answer. I don't think there's a good answer. I think there's a right and a wrong way to approach an angler based on the circumstances. and it could depend on whether I'm hungover or whether I'm happy or sad, or if I know my dog or whatever. I mean, I might be nice. I might tell you to go fuck yourself. But, I mean, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. And there's no, you've heard them, Paul, and so is Matt. I mean, you hear some pretty egregious things where Angler A goes and blasts him in a culvert and is dumb enough to tell Angler B that he blasted him at that culvert. And then guess who shows up at that culvert the next day on tournament day? Angler B.
Yeah.
That ain't right.
Well, what did the TOC in 2020 or 2021 where Lambert had his spot? Folks know where it was. And old boy rolled up in there and tried to fish it.
Yeah, that was the Knoxville TOC. And now that I love Lambert to death, but Lambert's dumbass posted a picture that any human being on planet Earth could have Googled Earth and been like, oh damn, that's the what do you call the things where you rope slide down there? You do the V and you slide. What do you call that?
The zip line.
Zip line. The only zip line in East Tennessee is in the background of where he wrecked those tournament fish. And there's only one place on the Broad River that zip tie thing is. And I was like, this Kamyati saw a picture and showed up. And I'm like, I was like, he don't own the water. And I think they had some words, and Lambert, ended up in his spot. And that was, I know exactly where he was fishing. That was a very concentrated, unique spot. And we still to this day don't know why the fish were stacked in there like they were. But yeah, I mean, that's tough. And that's just my opinion, and everybody's got an opinion, and it is what it is.
Matt, have you run into that in the time that you've been fishing? Because you fish a lot of the national tournaments, and you fish obviously where you fish in Tennessee is real competitive. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, I haven't had any negative experience with it. Like you were talking about that video. I think that was Nolan Minor, maybe on sand. I can't remember what tournament that was, but it was Nolan Minor, I remember. And but no, back at the TOC last year, I had a guy, Kurt Smits, deferred to me. I was sitting in a better position than him, but honestly, we were in similar positions. There wasn't that many. I mean, I might have had him by 5 or 6 places or something. In my mind,
that ain't nothing. That's a fish.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in his shoes, I wouldn't have deferred to me, but he did, and I was grateful for it. But the way I look at it, like, if you're just fishing for a big fish, like, you have no chance at a top 25 or 30, because with these big fields that we've got in the Hobie BOS, if you're not a top 25 or 30, you really are not getting valuable points for TOC, So if you don't have some of these events, you can be in 70th or 80th place and it's stacked really tight. Now that's rare, but if you don't have a legitimate chance at a top 25 or 30, then that's probably when you should maybe be deferring to somebody that had a better day on day one. But now if I fish there the day before and I'm in, I don't know, somewhere between 15th and say 40th place or 30th place, and somebody comes in there that's in the top 5 or 10, hell no, I ain't deferring to them. I was there the day before. I have a chance at cashing or getting valuable points. I'm not doing it, but it's kind of a fine line there. I'm not going to defer too much, but if I'm totally out of it and there's a guy in contention, I'll give it to him for sure. But I think.
Go ahead.
No. I'm done.
I think it's interesting. It's even though that you have a lot of crowded fields, usually people spread out to a degree where you don't really get too intimate with another person. And like I said, the incident with Ron was at the ramp before we even launched, and that's fine. That day, it was so windy at Eufaula. Christine and I fished the same pocket, and she's great on the water and very professional. She said, "E, which side do you want? You want the rocks or you want the grass?" I said, "I think I'll take the rocks." So I went right to the rocks and she went left and flipped the grass. She won TOC and I didn't win nothing, So, and then we were talking about a little protected area that was the size of a small farm pond, so we could see each other, not catching or catching fish. I think that was maybe her second or third spot. I think she did most of her damage at a different ramp, but it's like on the water when you got wind and weather and you're trying to get out of something. I mean, it's just, hey, which side do you want? I mean, it's just kind of like golf etiquette, let the faster players play through, foursomes take precedence. I'm with Matt. I think if you paid your entry and you've traveled and you got a chance to cash and you fished that ramp before, I mean, if you didn't have an incident on Saturday, you shouldn't have an incident on Sunday, regardless of somebody's position. And again, you got guys practicing for weeks, and sometimes in some cases you take the Santee Cooper event and you give Vinny props for having such a good local trail and such good participation. I mean,
stealing my thunder, but go ahead.
But I mean, those guys, I mean, and I was going to mention this earlier, just because you're not fishing a national trail doesn't mean you're not fishing against hammers. I mean, you look at the guys stacked up at QC, you look at some of the guys at TVKA, you look at even up there where Matt fishes. I mean, those king guys, I mean, there's some, if you're in Southeast United States, I mean, that's something about being from the country. These people know how to fish, and but you figure a guy like Joey Randall or Vinny or some of those other guys that really show out on that QC group. I mean, some of them know Santee Cooper really well. They had the ability to practice a ton, and good for them. So it's like, just because somebody wasn't there on Saturday doesn't give them a lesser right to go there on Sunday. And hell, at Santee, Jordan and I went to 2 ramps both mornings and went to 2 different ramps because they were too crowded. And we fished 2 days areas we didn't even practice just to try to get away from people. So again, that's a very dicey.
And a lot of times the stuff you're talking about is getting fished and you don't see it. Like
Correct.
Whether it's bass boats or other competitors, when you're fishing 2 pockets down or across the lake or whatever. So, I mean, it's not like if you let a guy fish it or don't let a guy fish it, it's still probably going to get fished at some point. Like, you kind of need to let that go to some degree. I think some of that's more mental than anything.
When you have limited access and honestly, even with the motors being allowed in practice and the Hobies, you can only cover so much water. And so, once you take the motor off the boat and you're manual and you got a fixed number of ramps, that water has been touched by somebody. In many cases, multiple people, so I think it's just kind of one of those deals where regardless of where you fish and who's around you, you're going to have to catch them, and you may have to get creative on how you catch them. I've even kind of defaulted this year to, if my ramp's not crowded, I'm probably not fishing the right spot.
Right.
Because I've always really been one to try to get away from people. And it's like, if everybody wants to fish Given Creek, maybe I should take take 2 steps back and be like, it's okay that there's 10 people here. So,
I think when you're talking 200 people, you're not far off with that, because there's so many people
not with the kayak, especially for what you said earlier, Matt, with the amount of ground you can cover with the places that we can launch.
You're limited, and you got people that's practicing. I mean, I could be way off on this, but I feel like it close to half of the field starts practicing on Monday for a Hobie event. It seems like everywhere we go, there is so many people starting practice on Monday for a tournament that starts on Saturday, so, and some people even longer, some people that do this for a living or whatever else, you could have people practicing for a week and a half on a body of water, and how many ramps and access points can they hit in a week's time? If you're Jordan Marshall, you can hit 4 in a day, and you can at least do 2 and cover them pretty thoroughly. And some of these lakes that we fish don't have many more access points than that. You can almost hit them all. So, no matter what you're picking, you're going to be fishing behind people or stuff that's already getting fished, It makes it tough with the large fields for sure.
Yeah. And I brought that up because you do hear a lot. So with the Paddle and Fin and KBN, these guys that interview the tournament anglers, especially after winning, this year it seems like there's been a lot of folks that have thanked other folks for, oh, you're in first place, I'll move out of here. We've heard a lot of that. But let's take Santee again. And we're harping on Santee, one, because all of us were there together. But also, I think it was one of these tournaments that showed this. Vinny Ferrari from Queen City was 50th. 50th place on day one. 50. He rolls up to his spot on day 2, catches the shit out of him, and finishes 10th. He goes from, losing money to, I'm guessing, probably covered his personal cost. He finished 10th because he finished second that second day. So he won money. Let's say he won enough money to cover his whole travel down there. And that's always the thing, right? If his fish weren't there Saturday, we've already talked about how the weather conditions on Saturday fucking sucked. But Sunday, that shit set up right. And Vinny's like, those fish are going to be here. He gets there, and let's say Eric rolls up and is like, hey, bitch, I'm in 3rd place. I'm fishing first. And Vinny's like, nah, dude. Go find your own fucking shit. My fish are going to be here today. And then Vinny potentially will look like the bad guy, but then he finishes 10th because he wrecked them. And Team Vu, I didn't get to him to see where he was after the first day, but he ended up finishing in the money too. So, I mean, y'all both are right. You touched on it. It's a fine line between, hey, I know I'm here or this and that, but Vinny first was 50th. Did anybody think he was going to finish in the top 20 after going 50th? I mean, maybe he did that day.
I think
it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities, though. Like the way that tournament was, and as tough as it was on Saturday, I don't think you need to get too hung up on what place it is, but how many inches are you, back from whatever,
That's
say
true.
20th or 25th place,
Because the 77 inches had you in the top 30, I think, at that point, didn't it?
I was in the 30s somewhere, Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that's.
I think in most cases, and again, I mean, 99.9%, even the cases that I brought up, they weren't confrontational. They weren't. They weren't. None of those persons that I brought up, they didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. It does take a level of confidence or arrogance to do that to a different angler that's competing, especially at a TOC on the second day of a 3-day tournament. But that's a whole nother story. But my last point that I'll leave with you before I bust out of here is
well, I got some questions for you. Hold real quick, Matt. Do you have some time after he leaves?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right, finish, Eric, and I got some questions for you before you leave.
I think that there's so much water that you can compromise. There's typically not an area that's so concentrated that, there can't be, something. And I think, the individual makes a difference. But I could see Vinny saying, look, hey, let's share this spot. We'll alternate casts or whatever. And if it comes to that, and again, I've been doing this a long time, and I've never felt put out. I've felt like some people tried to big time me, and that's okay because that's, I mean, you know what I'm saying? And that's their choice.
Yeah.
And in both cases, I kind of let them. And that, again, that's a hobby for me, and neither one of those tournaments was I in a tremendously, competitive position. Now I finished 19th at TOC, which I'm proud of that finish. The scenario at South Carolina, I struggled. I didn't do well, but yeah, I mean, I think, there's plenty of water, and here's what's funny about the drama behind some of the things that's happened, there's probably more back and forth between boats and kayaks than there is kayaks and kayaks.
Right.
Because bass boats will cut you off knowing good and well you're going to try to cover a stretch, a bank, just because you can't get there as quickly as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm just kind of like throwing my arms in the air, like, come on, guys, I know you may
Hey,
I don't even want to get into that.
Old boy from Alabama ran across a Queen City guy that he didn't know what he was getting into, and he got his ass beat.
That was funny.
I wish we had video of that.
That was the funniest
I know
thing
they reached out golly, that was great. Look, so I'll say this, because of what we talked about earlier with how ramps are, with how fucking crazy they can be in the morning, there's not I'm not going to be first at a lot of things. I'm going to be first at the ramp. And if we're pedaling out to an area, my goal is to beat you to wherever the fuck. I don't care if you make a hard beat. I'm going to beat you to the point you turn off, right? But I carry a firearm because you never know what you're going to roll up to on the fucking ramp at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I keep one in my life jacket.
No, yeah, you just never know. And until most people listen to this podcast, all 3 or 4 of them will probably understand that. But anyway, all right, Eric, we're gonna get you out of here, but got a few questions real quick.
All right.
I need you to answer these. 1, honestly, and 2, there ain't no thinking, no umming. I'm gonna ask you a question. You need to answer that bitch. All right.
All right.
Crocs or flops?
Flops.
My man, you suck. Fucking flops get slippery, man. Your feet be. God.
You told me to answer honest questions, so shut the fuck up and ask them.
I didn't say I wasn't going to chastise you for wrong answers. Pineapple on pizza yesterday. Hey, Mike, Matt, I ought to kick your ass out of this so you don't have time to think about it, but I'm going to fuck you up because we're going to talk about some other shit and you ain't going to remember.
That's
pineapple on pizza.
That's un-American.
I know, that's like putting Canadian bacon, which is fucking sliced ham. Ugh. You gonna spend more on a rod or a reel?
A reel. I'm gonna break the rod. 100% chance.
And I remember talking to you about buying Shimano reels after you saw how bad Jordan treated his shit, and they still kept working.
That's
right. You were like, I'm buying Shimano reels because Jordan fucks his shit up, and they never quit working.
That's right. That's exactly right.
How Jordan Marshall doesn't have a Shimano sponsorship.
He needs one.
It's fucked up. He does, because I saw his reels and he had Chronarchs from like a long time ago. I'm like, how the fuck is he fishing with this shit? Because not only were they old, they looked like he had dragged them around the parking lot in a parking lot behind his truck. It's insane.
He calls it patina, and I call it blatant negligence.
Yes. First of all, how the fuck do his rods make it through what he does?
I don't know.
And second, what line does he's got to be using the Walmart Cajun special line to not break him. His shit is a fucking wreck, man. That's funny as hell. In a 3-hour session, you want to catch 5 2-pounders or 1 7-pounder?
1 7-pounder.
Now, my man, wacky rig or Texas rig?
Neither.
Nope, that ain't the fucking question. Answer the
question. Neither. Texas rig.
Okay. I thought you say wacky being on the river. You just let it float down, hook big ass fish and all that. Slow jams or hype music?
Slow jams.
My man, you can tell this motherfucker old. He listens to some Barry Manilow coming up on the ramp. So loud, you can't even hear the mufflers coming off his truck.
Keith Sweat is Big Fish Radio.
Hey, Bo. Keith Sweat. Matt was like 5 years old when Keith Sweat came out, but that was some humping music right there. You knew you was getting some ass if she put that shit on.
That's right.
All right. Have you ever eaten beaver?
Yes.
How delicious was it?
It depends on what flavor.
That usually throws people for a loop, but somebody as old and as debauchery as Eric is, I know he'd answer that shit right, and he did. Do you eat largemouth bass?
I have.
Do you? Not have you?
I mean, I don't keep the fish that I catch to clean and eat, but
Look,
in a pinch, I have eaten largemouth bass.
Look,
it's all about
pinch.
It's all
Look,
about the sauce.
If you fish in a spot, Christine Fisher's fishing on Saturday morning, and you're fishing on Friday afternoon, you keep all your limit of those largemouth bass. You take them bitches home and you eat them.
Now that I didn't think about it like that, but that's probably
That's defense.
Could beat somebody. So
Christine's like, my fish weren't there. So I was like, I flayed every damn one of them. Look,
You need to start shocking them up.
Yeah, I caught a 23-incher. I had 18 nuggets from
That's
that
right.
one fish. I came to the homeless guy down there at the ramp that broke into Jordan Marshall's truck. All right, Sam, this is the one question Bass and Brews that we're known for. From all 1.5 people that actually listen to the podcast this far in, what are your top 3 sandwich proteins?
Turkey, ham, steak. Because you saw what you saw at a steak wrap whenever we were staying together.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Steak. This man has a Wagyu #1 grade steak sandwich on the water.
That was the best. That was the best lunch I've ever had on the water. It was a wrap and Wagyu steak. Outstanding.
If you ever get a chance to stay with Eric, go stay with him, because you're going to have leftover Wagyu steak for your sandwich on the water the next day.
That's all only if Paul brings the steaks, because they were about 3 pounds a piece. Because normally I don't eat. Normally there's no steak leftovers, but these were special. So,
well, I got Josh used to be my neighbor. We were neighbors for about 2.5 years, and so when I told him I was heading down there, we tried to meet up a little bit closer, but we didn't. But dude, I need tomahawk. I need tomahawk steaks. I need the real motherfuckers. Like, I don't need no. I need, and he hooked us up, and he gave us the sausages and shit, which we didn't end up eating. I ate at home; they were delicious.
Yeah, no, that was a treat.
Any sponsors you want to holler out? Anybody like that you want to give props to? All that good stuff.
Just Cashin has been great to myself and Jordan this year, and that's a North Carolina group, good guys.
15 minutes from the house, they came down, visited Cashin, didn't holler at me, didn't come see me. Y'all are assholes, but anyway, keep going.
Well, we're gonna come back and fish some of your home waters, so we'll
hell
do that.
Yeah! Show me how to catch fish. That's what I need y'all to do.
I don't know about all that, but we at least give you some entertainment quality. But Frontier Outdoors, Brant and those guys have been real good to me. So that's the 2 folks that do things for me. And of course, the community is a good group of people, and, just to appreciate the acceptance and enjoy seeing people, the young guys being successful and people that are doing well this year. Kudos to them. It's not easy. I mean, Matt knows that, Jordan knows that. It's tough to compete with these folks. So keep on keeping on.
Well, that's good. I know, from my time being in the area, even though I haven't fished a lot of these tournaments, just my time being in the kayak side of the industry, Eric, you're a lot of people like you, and you do right by folks. And so that's good. That's why anytime you have anything to say or post, everybody's going to put up #pro.
They keep it up.
Yeah. Now we need to just get #pro smalls going, since you got that fucking 1950s hat on.
This is a pimp hat, man. That's Tennessee golf, baby. Big orange. So.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you
y'all for having me.
Yeah, shit, man. Y'all, it's just me. Alex ain't here. Fuck him. He's out swashbuckling, scrubbing decks or something on a boat
I got
out on the West Coast. But thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. I'm going to keep Matt on here for at least 2 to 3 more hours.
All right.
Because he doesn't have a job to go to tomorrow, apparently.
No.
It won't be that long, but Matt, we're going to cover some other stuff. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you,
Appreciate
guys.
it, buddy.
We'll
Hey,
see you.
safe travels, bud.
Thanks
Later.
a lot. Bye.
So, Matt, we're gonna go a little bit longer here because you and I started about the same time. I'd had a kayak on the Savannah River, but I just fiddle farted around, nothing special. But you as you referenced earlier, you just got into this, and you're a name that folks know on the national trail. And you even said earlier how fishing was kind of just something you just did. And then 2019, 2020 rolls around and you got into it. What is the catalyst that kind of got you to where you are now, where you're competing and where people who know you're on the national stage? And what is it the homework? Is it because, with fishing, you have an innate ability. People have an innate ability to fish well, but you have to know where the fish are and you have to know how to catch them, right? That's the two things. You can't catch fish where fish ain't. And you've done a good job at being able to find fish and catch them. Like, what has been the thing that has got you to be able to compete with not a lot of past history?
It's kind of interesting on how I got into it. Like I mentioned earlier, I shot a lot of competitive archery and still do a lot of bow hunting and stuff. Honestly, if I had to pick bow hunting or fishing, that gets tougher to pick between the two, but I still would lean towards bow hunting. But I worked at Bass Pro Shops for a couple years up until probably 2016. And that's when I left and went to the post office. And right before I quit Bass Pro Shops, a buddy of mine at work there talked about getting a kayak and fishing kayak tournaments and kayak fishing and stuff. And it sounded fun. Got a pretty big discount on the kayaks at that time working there. And right before I quit, I bought an Ascend kayak. And me and him rigged our kayaks up, and he found this local club close to us and said, dude, let's go fish this. And I said, dude, I'm all in. Let's do it. And we went and fished it. I don't even remember how we did or anything, but that was in 2016, actually. And then I started working at the post office. All that went on the back burner, kayak set in the garage for 3 years. And like I mentioned, I started kind of getting burnt out on the archery thing and wanted to kind of find something else. And we've been fishing a little bit off a bass boat. And I said, I think I'm going to get that kayak out and fish another one of those kayak tournaments. That was fun. And went out, fished a nighttime kayak tournament and was competitive. I think I finished third or fourth in that one. And I fished the last 3 or 4 that year. So kind of at the end of 2019, leading into 2020, I said, this is kind of what I want to do. This is fun. I enjoy it. Let's just see what we can do with it. And that's what started everything there.
And I asked that question because we have a lot of folks that I know who are newer into kayak fishing a lot. And again, this podcast was created more from the folks that were creating Instagram and YouTube, and now we've got quite a few folks from TikTok. So it was these folks that were creating good content. And since the time that I've been doing it, since the time that I got into kayak fishing locally, you run across a bunch of kayak anglers. We got 2 trails here local to us. And so I always ask, hey, do you fish these trails? Like, no, there's, tournaments for kayaks. I'm like, hell yeah. So to me, it's one of these things, like there's all these tournaments around here and nationally. And you run across the majority of people that go, there's tournaments. And then the next biggest thing that I hear is, well, I'm not good enough to fish tournaments. And I think the mindset that they have are like the Elite Series or, maybe they fish some local club tournaments out the back of the boat, and they're like, yeah, I can't do that. And it's just interesting because of course, I say this now, and you just said 2016 in kayak fishing was it was the beginning of that curve up. There's folks that have been, the saltwater kayak side has been around for a long ass time. We had the guys from Paddle and Fin, those guys have been fishing out of kayaks since, the 2000s and into the 2010s. So it's been around a long time. But you got that first little taste of it really, really early. Kind of when KBF was really just starting to take off and to build what we have now. And nobody can take that away from KBF. They were the ones that built what we're able to do regionally, nationally, locally. But it's interesting that you had that hiatus and then came on and you've done so well, because I know how to fish. I fished out of boats and all this. Fish out of a kayak is fucking hard. It's a whole different ball game. And even with me knowing how to fish and me knowing how to find fish, I struggle. But you take that over the last 3 years have been able to take your knowledge and be super successful locally and nationally. I mean, what's some advice maybe you could give to some guys that are listening that are looking to get into it or don't think they're good enough? Like what was the thing that you said, I can do this shit, and then got you to here?
Man, I've kind of been the same way no matter what it is I've done. Like, I played sports growing up, and it was basketball early on and was obsessed with it. Even as a kid, I was out playing basketball all the time, trying to get better. And then picked up a golf club in high school, and it was hours a day hitting golf balls, and then it was archery for like 10 years, and I was really obsessed with it. And then fishing come along, and I've worked at it, pretty hard to kind of, I mentioned it earlier, speed up that learning curve, because, in fishing, like Eric, for instance, he's got unlimited time. Basically, he can spend a ton of time on the water, and you're always going to have that. I can't do that. Like, I would say this year I've spent 5 or 6 days of fun fishing, period. That was not practice for a Hobie or whatever. So my time off the water, I put a lot of time in there. But I've had those times where you're like, man, I really can do this. And when I come back in that first tournament I fished in 2019, kind of after that break there, I fished one random one in 2016. But 2019, like I said, I finished 3rd or 4th in that first one. There was probably 20 guys in it. And I had no clue really what I was doing. I was like, man, I can do this. I can compete. And fished 4 or 5 after that the rest of that year, and was competitive in all of them. I think I was in the top 25% of the field every time. So then when 2020 come along, I think I won the second local tournament of 2020. So I was like, okay, I can do this, and kind of competed for AOI that year there. And I didn't even really know about the Hobies or anything like that. And I can remember somewhere towards the middle of 2020, I found KBN and started listening to the podcast and stuff, and realized there was this whole world of KBF and Hobie and all this that I had no idea was even there. And I can remember being in Illinois deer hunting at the end of 2020 and keeping up with Jordan and Lambert battling back and forth at the TOC at Hobie. And I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, dude, he just won $30,000 out of a plastic freaking boat. I was like, this is way bigger than I even imagined it was, So I think shortly thereafter, Hobie released their schedule for 2021. And one of the lakes on there was Watts Bar Lake, which is, never fished it before, but it was 2.5 hours from my house. And I was like, man, this is a really good opportunity to maybe just kind of dip my toe into this national thing and just see, it'd be a good experience. It's a new lake I've never fished before, just kind of see what happens. And I made a trip. I think it was February something, so it was pretty early in the year. And I went down a couple weeks before and fished for 2 days and caught like 2 bass the whole time. And I was like, man, this is tough, And I went down the Friday before the tournament, fished for 8 hours straight and did not catch a bass. And I was like, this is, what the heck am I doing? And I, looked on the map that night, and I'd fished about 5 or 6 different areas between the, a couple days beforehand and the pre-fishing day. And I was like, I don't like any of this. Let's just pick something new. I'm going to, it was really cold at that time. That's probably one of the coldest Hobie tournaments we've ever had. They delayed the start by like 2.5 hours. We had like 20-degree temperatures that morning on Saturday.
Was that the tournament? The water was up real high too?
No, I don't think that. No, it was still drawn down. Lambert ended up winning that one, but it was just so cold. I picked an area that it was a main lake channel swing. It was cold. I knew I wanted to be on the main lake. I took my trusty jerk bait, like an Alabama rig, and my little small Kayak swim bait. And I was like, this is my cold water stuff. It should work. Ended up catching a limit that first day, and I think I was in like seventh or 8th place. And I was like, damn, that worked out good. I got 5 bites, got them all on the boat. I was like, I got a chance, And went out the next day and ended up breaking a fish off early and ended up with 4 fish on day 2 and finished in 4th place. First ever Hobie tournament, finished in 4th. And all I needed was 12-inch fish to win. And I broke that fish off early that morning, and I was like, man, I can do this, So that was like another one of those moments that kind of reassured me that, hey, you can play at this level. At first it was local tournaments, and then now we're at the national level. And I was like, okay, well, I qualified for the TOC, and I didn't fish any more Hobies that year. I was going to fish Hartwell, and it just didn't work out schedule-wise. So going into the TOC, I'm in the room. We go to the check-in, and like Eric mentioned earlier, you've got 50 of it's the who's who of kayak fishing. All those kayak people that by their first name. There's a bunch of them out there. They're all in this one room, and you're looking around, and you're like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I had this one tournament. I was like, it could have been a little fluky. Who knows, but it's such a stacked field, and had an awesome tournament there and ended up finishing 4th at that one too. And had a good check, so that was another bit of reassurance. Like, hey, I done it once. Now I've done it twice. It's not exactly a fluke. And then you just kind of start building some confidence from there. And so much of fishing is confidence, trusting what your gut tells you to do and having confidence that that's the right thing to do. And you just need to start listening to it. And, Eric was talking about having a slump, and, part of that is you start second guessing yourself, and you don't have that same level of confidence that you do when things are rolling good. So, once you get some of that reassurance that you can do it, confidence is huge in fishing, and momentum's a real thing.
So you qualify for the TOC. It sounds like the decisions that you made for that tournament were based off of how you felt, your intuition.
100%.
From there, you finish 4th in the TOC. So you're still new into this arena, and at this point in time, you're in there. You're in the TOC with the top 50. You're networking. You're making friends with people. Is it strictly intuition and just your thought process and being competitive and how you want to do? Did you have any help from other anglers along the way that got you, kind of to where you are now? And I ask that because a lot of folks here locally, I talk to a lot of I love to talk to people. And again, I want to, if we go fishing, fun fishing, tournament fishing, doesn't fucking matter. I want to catch more and bigger than you. But, you know, I like to share the information here locally with anybody, you know, with the folks that are around here, especially kayak fishing. I like to share information. You know, I want to see people catch fish. I want to see them catch big fish. To me, the secrets in fishing are far and few between now because of technology and all the stuff that goes with it and the amount of information that's out there. But have you had help from Eric and obviously I say Eric and Jordan because I know you room with those, but from these other people, have they helped you progress into where you are now?
It's kind of an interesting question.
Yeah, and I say this from this viewpoint. Some people won't help, right? They ask a lot of questions. And I'm not talking about the people that are just asking for spots and lures, right? I'm talking about people that want to learn. And you have that. Then you have the other side of it where that people are like, I'm going to do this shit on my own. If I get too much help, I feel like it takes me out of what I know. So I ask this, like, let me try to ask this question right. How has being around some of the tournament anglers helped you, or do you just do what you do?
I would say for the most part, I do what I do. Now,
okay.
I like talking fishing, and if we get to talking about, I'll talk techniques and lures and strategy with anybody. I've always been, and Eric talked about this, on the few fishing YouTube videos I made. I've always been super transparent about anything and everything that I do. Now, there are the rare occasions that there's something special, whether it's an area or whatever, but that is super rare. Now, you talked about Jordan and Eric and learning from them. A lot of what I've learned from them has just been the traveling and practice and doing that deal, because the way they fish and the way I fish is totally different.
I can tell because you're a lake guy like me, and those dudes want to get up in skinny ass water.
Yeah, what Eric and Jordan do are totally different than what I do. There's some stuff I've asked Jordan questions about chatterbaits, or what do you like for this trailer, or whatever. We'll talk tackle and stuff like that. But if my girlfriend was on this right now, she would tell you that every night I'm probably watching at least an hour of some type of fishing before I go to bed every night. So I'm always trying to soak up anything and everything that I can to maybe learn a little bit of something, But now when we get to a Hobie and we're fishing a tournament or whatever, I pay very little attention to what the dock talk is and what people are talking about. I want to do it my way, whatever that is for that given tournament. But I want to talk and learn and do everything, but I kind of want to do it my way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I love sharing information. I do ask a lot of questions, but I'm also like I fish. I know how I like to fish, and so I ask a lot of questions. But I'm like, all right, how do I fit this information in with what I want to do? And for me, sometimes I don't put the information to use like I should. And, coming as somebody that wants to get into tournament angling from a local or a national mindset, there's a lot that goes into it from just the fishing side. And then when you have to travel 10 or 12 or 20 hours to a location and have your shit set up and to get out there and to fish at, I think that's where I have probably asked the most questions about, is like, how are you breaking down a new body of water? Somewhere that you're not necessarily comfortable fishing that body of water. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that some kayak anglers are afraid to ask. And I think that's a fishing thing in whole, is because of the secrecy and how people like spots, is that it makes people afraid to ask for help, regardless if it's travel or fishing.
I had questions about that too. I kind of leading into like that Lake Fork and Toledo Bend trip, the initial trip we all took together this year. I'd asked Jordan, like, kind of what are you looking for and that sort of thing. And honestly, we were kind of on the same relative page. What I was looking at, what he was looking at was pretty similar. But
that's
the big thing
for you, right? That's
absolutely. That was like another thing where, like, I'm kind of doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And the big thing with like getting information and doing something with it is like, if you're talking at a tournament and you hear people, you always hear stuff like so-and-so caught 100 inches doing this, does what I'm hearing make sense? Like, if what they're saying makes sense with kind of what I think's going on, then that kind of maybe reassures like what I'm already thinking. But if it's like so-and-so caught 100 inches on a frog in February, in 48-degree water, I'm like, get the hell out of here. I don't want anything to do with that.
I don't know how to catch. I don't know how to catch fish on. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's too. So
I don't let it affect me negatively. But if it's something that reassures something I'm already thinking, I'll let it affect me, positively that way.
Yeah, and so that's important to hear. Anybody that's still on this podcast listening, and I'm going to make sure that we make sure that new kayak anglers that want to get into competitive fishing, doesn't matter locally or nationally, I'm going to highlight this to make sure they listen to the end. This is why I wanted to keep you on, was for that thing, because you can't catch other people's fish, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's 50-degree water and somebody's catching them on a damn frog, and you're like, shit, I've never thrown a fucking frog. You're not going to be able to catch those fish. Maybe.
Yeah, I ain't going to. Like, I'm not going to try.
Yeah, you're not going to try. But that's also something to put in your toolbox to maybe practice or come in there, or that situation, that area, a situation arises that, like, damn, maybe next year you're like, shit, I remember Matt said he caught fish on a frog in this scenario. Let me try it in a practice. And again, it comes back to what we talked about earlier with how kayak angling right now, and I think it changes in the future when we start to get a professional or a couple professional trails. I think some of this information and the sharing and the camaraderie breaks apart, because people are going to be fishing for livelihoods then. So that changes everything. It's a whole different podcast. But, having heard that is a little bit of information that you could put in your toolbox that maybe you take home, that you can put into a local tournament. And the full circle comes around to just being open to listen to what other people have to say. And to kind of prod them. It's like, hey, man, what are you doing? If they share, they share. Yeah. If they don't, they don't.
You gotta be careful with that too, because you got to put some thought into how reliable the information is. Who's who's telling it to you. If it's somebody you truly trust, then I'll put that in the memory bank. Like, because at some point you may be faced with that situation at a different time that if you're at your wit's end, you might try it. But I would say what's helped me the most at being consistent, because if you look at like what I've done this year, I haven't had that many great finishes, but I've been consistent to some degree. You know, my worst finish in Hobie's been a 50th out of 200. You know, so that's top 25%.
That's fucking rocking, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I've been consistent, but I think part of that is when it comes time to fish the tournament, I'm not trying some new technique, and I'm not trying to do something I'm not comfortable with. I feel like I'm pretty versatile in techniques. There's a lot of stuff I have confidence in, and if it's something that I have confidence in, I'll lean on it, and that's kind of what I stick to in the tournament. You know, I'm not out there trying to do something that's outside of my realm or something I'm not familiar with or whatever, you know. So I try and stick to my strengths.
And so your strengths, are you more of a finesse angler, more of a power angler?
I am okay. I am competent with a spinning rod, but that is not. We were talking about it the other day. In fact, Jordan Marshall has caught more spinning rod fish than me in 2022. So if that gives you any indication about me and a spinning rod, I'm more of a power fisherman, but I'm not stuck into one or two or three techniques. You know, it seems like kayak fishermen are synonymous with chatterbaits and jackhammers. It's like everyone throws one like 75% of the time. And, you know, I throw one too from occasion, but, you know, I feel like I carry a lot of tackle, and I've got a lot of stuff in my tackle box that I feel confident in. So I feel like when I go to a tournament that I've got a kind of an idea of 4 or 5 things that should work given the time of year, you know, water conditions, water temperature, that sort of thing. And then it's my job to kind of adjust from there and figure out which one's going to be the deal, or what color adjustments I need to make based off water clarity or whatever, you know. But I'm more of a power fisherman than I am a finesse fisherman, for sure.
I think that's important for people to hear, though. Like, you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you need to have the gear and the knowledge to be able to throw a drop shot or a shaky head or a Ned rig when that situation calls for it on tournament day. And if you want to go out there and your plan is to throw crankbaits and jackhammers and, you know, a top water, but tournament day rolls around and that's just, you know, from water clarity and weather and all those intangibles, you got to be able to switch it up. But you don't have to be an expert to be able to do that. And again, that information lends to how you've been consistent, is that you can adjust to be able to fish for that day on the water. That's something I've been working on. And as a new angler, it comes easier to some people, right? You know, I mean, some people will throw on a drop shot or a shaky head real quick and others won't. But, you know, it's interesting to hear that, because it sounds like that you're really not an expert in a finesse way, but when it calls for it, you're going to throw a spinning rod, or, you know, it doesn't even have to be a spinning rod. You're going to throw a finesse lure if that's what the hell it calls for that day. And it lends to consistency that you've had over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like I've got, you know, I don't know, but I feel like I've got probably 4 or 5 things techniques-wise on spinning rods that I feel good about, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff on the baitcaster stuff. But I think the important thing is when you get on tournament day, that's not the time to be trying new things. You know, hopefully going into the tournament, you've got a relative idea of what's going on. You know, I don't want too much information going into the tournament. I want a general area and a general idea of like what stage we're in and something to go off of, and then I'll figure the rest out on the water. I feel like I'm pretty good at making on the water adjustments, but that's something I'm always trying to get better at. But I feel like once I get on the water, you know, my instincts there are pretty good. A lot of times what I think is going to work going into it, most of every time that's not what actually works. And it seems
you just said the last tournament you had 15 minutes in, you changed your plan completely.
Yeah. And it seems like even on like the Hobie stuff, I think I fished six Hobie events, and I don't think I have maybe one time ended up fishing the first ramp I checked or the first ramp I fished. So my ability to pick an area like right off the bat, looking at a map, has a lot of room to grow, but as far as on the water, I feel pretty good about all that.
And I think about the Santee tournament. I was like, you know what? I could have thrown a floating worm in the same areas that I was throwing that frog, and probably caught the fish that missed that frog. I really do. I mean, just the situation and what it was, they probably would have bit that worm, single hook, better hookup rate, and probably could have caught those fish then. I was throwing a frog, which I hadn't thrown in fucking ever, on a new rod, a new reel, in a place I have never fished that had 14-foot alligators in it. And luckily we missed the Santee with the gators being really up there mating, even though the second day I was me and Ryan and I think Dylan was over there, I don't know, but they were humming, they were doing their mating, so we just missed them. But anyway, you still have that, in that area, you still have that in the back of your mind. But think about that. I probably should have been throwing something that I was better equipped to have fished. But that's the thing about fishing. That's the thing about folks that are just getting into the tournament side is, they're going to do what they feel comfortable with. But sometimes you just got to step out of that, but not necessarily try something brand spanking new on tournament day.
Yeah.
But your consistency,
you're just always learning.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about like YouTube and tactical bassing and stuff like that. Has that linked you more towards helping you find areas you're going to fish in, or have you used that information to try more techniques?
I think it's honestly, I think it's helped me more on the technique side.
Okay.
Making sure, like I mentioned earlier, I don't have the ability to have the time on the water that a lot of guys do. So I feel like with the research that you can do beforehand, you can have a technique pretty well dialed in. Like I'm not having to test 10 different trailers to go on the back of a chatterbait. Like I know here's 2 or 3 that probably work, and maybe something I can experiment with too. As far as on the water stuff and figuring that out, like what area you should be in and what looks good and what's going to be productive, that's kind of hard to learn without having that time on the water and making that judgment call like, hey, I think I need to go here, and it actually work out for you. So you can learn some stuff, probably watching those videos on areas and that sort of thing. But I think more than anything, it'd help you technique-wise. As far as fish movement and pattern and behaviors through the season, that stuff kind of made sense to me really quick. But the technique stuff, that's a rabbit hole that's never ending. I mean, you can learn as much as you want to learn about baits, techniques, and everything. You can make it as complicated as you want or as simple as you want.
And so the anglers that I know that are really good, what I would call savvy anglers, those guys that just have that intuitive, and I hate to use because Randy Blockett with intuitive angling is taking the word out, but the intuition, the savviness of fishing, right? Being able to find the fish. I believe that's the hardest part of fishing. Because you could be throwing the perfect lure, the perfect presentation in a place where there ain't no fish. And as Buck Perry said, you can't catch fish where fish ain't.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can throw the shittiest lure in the shittiest presentation in a place with fish, but you still have the opportunity to catch the fish because they're there. And so, from as folks coming into tournament angling and folks coming into fishing on a boat, not necessarily off the bank because you're limited to where you can fish, but just being able to identify places where the fish are. And it sounds like this whole almost 3-hour conversation and what you've talked, you've been able to really dial in where you think the fish are going to be, and they're there. And that's important because you can't catch fish if they ain't there, right? And you've done a good job with that. So I think people, in general, people need to take away the lures, the rods, the reels, all that shit. Put it secondary to thinking, where the fuck are the fish going to be?
Mm-hmm. And you're not always going to be in an area, like, part of kayak fishing is that you can't cover a lot of water. Like, you've got this one area that you've got that you can fish. And, like, I would say the main difference between what we do and what the bass boat guys do is the bass boat guys can run a pattern if they choose to. If they've got a crankbait bite on rock on the main lake, they can run that all over the damn lake and have a good bag. But as a kayak angler, you need to be more versatile. You've got maybe these 2 or 3 pockets or this section of lake that you can fish. And if you're only throwing 1 or 2 baits covering that area, you've not got that many fish that you can catch in most of the places we go. Like, you need to be well versed in several different baits to where you can throw the correct bait for what you've got in front of you. If you're cranking down say you're running a crankbait down a bank and you come up to a real good looking lay down, well, you need to have a jig or a creature bait there too that you can flip in that lay down after you run your crankbait over top of it, because there's probably a fish there. But if you just keep burning down your crankbait, you may catch one out of that lay down, but most likely you're leaving some fish there. But I think I'm good at just junk fishing and fishing what's in front of me and whatever lure fits what I see or what I think fits. So I'll end up with a lot of rods and a lot of different stuff going on at the time, but it works.
Well, hey man, whatever puts checks in the bank account, and whatever helps you catch fish. I mean, the whole thing is catching fish. If you catch fish, you put yourself in a better position to cash checks, or if you're just fun fishing, to have a good time on the water. So, I mean, then a lot comes into that. Well, look, we're going to wrap this up here shortly. So I've got a few questions to ask you, and you are going to get the same questions that our compadre asked, even though I forgot to ask him one that I'm going to ask you. So we're going to start with a shotgun round. Crocs or flops?
Crocs.
My man. Hell yeah. You can take these bitches off. They don't slip going up the ramp when you're trying to pull a 300-pound kayak up, even though you trailer yours because you're big money and I'm poor. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No.
See there. Are you from Tennessee originally?
Yeah.
Oh, I just remembered something. You talked about you love to talk fishing. That first Friday night when we got there, me and you stayed up way past everybody else talking, looking at the damn computer, looking at maps, looking at shit.
Yeah.
And we weren't looking at anything that we were fishing necessarily, but we were just in general talking fishing and places, not lures, not none of that shit. We were just looking at areas. That's the stuff that I like. That's what I geek out on. Is I don't give a shit about the lure. Typically, I want to hear what people.
I love it all. Whether we talk areas, fit, just anything fishing, I'll more than happy to talk it.
Oh yeah, that's it. So y'all heard that right now. If you're still listening, you message Matt and he will geek out on some fishing. He don't care what it is. You gonna spend more on a rod or a reel?
Reel. But that's close. That's close because I went both ways on that. I could go either way. The only reason I say reel is because with a kayak, and I take way too many rods on the damn thing, and I use the Hobie horizontal rod storage. I want to pull a guy. I'm going to mess some guides up. It pains me less if it's a $100 or $150 rod than if it's a $250 or $300 rod. But I'm spending the money on the reel.
Yeah, and I also go back and forth on this. Like, I like a good rod for certain stuff. So if I'm dragging a Carolina rig, I want a good rod. Right? I want to be able to feel the rocks, and I want to be able to feel them before I get hung in them. So whatever. But also, there's something to say about a good reel where you can cast consistently and not have a bird's nest, or and I don't get a lot of bird's nests, and that's usually, but just in general, being able to, you pick up that reel and casting that lure and being able to be repetitively consistent in how you throw it, I think,
and longevity, and then lasting for years and years and years.
Yeah, just the money. A damn $50 rod throwing a chatterbait. Well, unless you fuck it up and lose it in the water or slam it in a door or some bullshit, I mean, that's going to last you a lot longer than a Black Max throwing 1/2 ounce, 1,000 times. That's a good damn point right there. I like it. I like it. All right. In a 3-hour session, 5 2-pounders and 1 7-pounder.
Give me 5. I would rather catch a big one, but my tournament side of me, I always want 5 at all costs.
This ain't tournament or non-tournament question. It's literally when you go out and fish.
2-hour session, I'll take the 7-pounder.
Yeah, and a lot of people, we've had a handful that said the 2-pounders, and hey, I get it. I mean, some people just want to catch a bunch of fish. Don't care how fucking big they are. I got a buddy that has a bass boat that we fish with, and as long as something is pulling on the end of his rod, he's fucking happy. I'm like,
there ain't many 7-pounders where I come from, so I'll take the 7.
I tell him, it's like, Will, man, we have been here catching 1-pounders for an hour. Let's can we try to move out like 30 feet and maybe to catch one that's more than a pound? All right, wacky rig or Texas rig?
Texas rig.
Pegged or not?
Pegged unless I am fishing a worm. Occasionally when I fish a worm, I'll leave it unpegged, depending on if I'm flipping cover or whatever I'm doing. But 95% of the time, it's pegged.
Slow jams or hype music?
Most of the time, hype music, but depends on the mood.
Are you listening to that on the water or just to the ramp and farting around?
To the ramp. If I listen to music on the water, which is usually the first half of the day, I do not, and then sometimes I'll listen to it later. But it'll be slower music.
Have you ever eaten beaver?
Absolutely.
It's delicious, isn't it?
It is.
Alex Rudd, overrated or underrated?
Oh. Underrated. I think most people in the kayak fishing community, he's kind of new, but I think he's starting to catch on. They just had him on KBN last night. More people were seeing what he's putting out. I think he puts out good stuff. I talked to him him and Bailey talked for a long time at check-in at Chickamauga for the Hobie. Really good dude, him and Bailey both. So I think he is underrated. Okay.
Yeah. Him and Bailey both are overrated. Fuck those guys. I love them. They're awesome. I'm just kidding.
They're good.
We've had Alex on. We've had Bailey on. Bailey's been awesome. I talked to Alex too, but yeah, those are good guys for sure. Do you eat largemouth bass?
I have and I will, but I do not keep them. Not that I'm against it, but it's not like I have a live well in the kayak. if we go out and catch fish to eat, it's going to be walleye or spotted bass. I think those two.
Hold up.
Or what?
You have walleye where you are in Tennessee?
Yep.
I've never eaten a walleye, but I heard they are the absolute best freshwater fish ever.
They're very good. For me, I mean, I like them. I like crappie or crappie or whatever, however you want to say it. But,
crappie, fuck crappie. If they say crappie, they're not true Southerners. It's crappie.
It's crappie where I live too. So yeah, I mean, crappie, walleye, spotted bass, all those are all good in my book. But walleye is very good.
You ever eaten carp?
No. Did I?
Look, I'm from South Carolina, and we ate carp growing up. That shit was delicious too. People just don't know how to cook it.
I ain't gonna turn my nose up at anything. I'll try it once.
Mm-hmm. Well, you say that, you little skinny bitch. You look at my fat ass, and people would believe me. You say that shit, people like this bitch don't eat no carp. All right. Anglers love sandwiches. Probably at this point in time, to my knowledge, second to beef jerky. But this is Bass and Brews, so we want to know your top 3 sandwich proteins.
Well, I'm going to say that Eric kind of made me think of something on this that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Steak is a clutch choice. I'm going to say steak and chicken and turkey.
So are we having a hunk of like chicken breast or chicken thighs, or are we doing sliced chicken from the grocery store?
I mean, most of the time it's going to be sliced chicken from the grocery store. But if we're being honest about on-the-water snacks, anytime I ever pack a sandwich, most 9.9 times out of 10, it's going to stay in the front hatch of my kayak until I go to use it again. I never stop to eat. It sounds like a great idea to take it, but I never actually end up eating it. So I ain't getting all fancy with the sandwich because the odds of me eating it's pretty damn slim.
Yeah, I hardly ever eat shit when I'm fishing. Ever.
That's how I am.
Ever. I every now and again in the morning, if I drink a lot of alcohol the night before, I'll stop and get like some snack sticks or beef jerky or a big ass bag of like trail mix. But I typically ain't eating shit on the water. And I was a wildland firefighter, and they gave us sandwiches in the morning at like 5 o'clock. And by the time you ate that bitch at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there ain't no coolers for us. That bitch has been in your pack, smashed against it. You pull it out, it looks like a burrito, except all the bread is either melted because you tried to shove it between 2 cold water bottles, so it all got soggy, or you put it on the top so it didn't get soggy and it was crusty as fuck. So this is an Alex question. Look, his ass don't tournament fish. He'd be out there fun fishing, eating sandwiches and shit. All right, who do you have to shout out? Sponsors, wives, girlfriends, baby mamas, anybody like that you want to shout out for the probably at this point in time, 3 hours, 7 minutes in, the 0 people that are listening, who do you want to shout out to them? There'll be more than that, but I'm just saying.
Man, I ain't got any sponsors, but I will shout out our local fishing shop. The name of it's Just Fishing in Bristol, Virginia. If you're ever passing through on I-81, Tennessee, Virginia area, they are a fantastic shop. You can also order online, free shipping, anything over $75, and they got a lot of stuff in stock. They help me out a little bit, with a little bit of a discount. But other than that, girlfriend puts up with me traveling and fishing every chance I get. That's the only other person I really got to thank.
Nice. And so Bristol, have you been to a Bristol race yet?
Ton of them.
How awesome?
Yeah, I've been to a ton of them. Used
How
to be
awesome.
more awesome. It used to be more awesome, but the experience was a lot better, when it was full. But it's still cool to go to. Everybody should go see it at least once.
So I grew up in South Carolina. Darlington was like 30 minutes from me. So I've been to a few Darlington races, and back in the day, they were good stuff. All right, babe, hang on real quick. We're gonna end this show right here. Thank you. Damn.
Thank you.
I had a burp. Thank y'all for listening. We appreciate it. If you stayed this long, you just got so much good information from Matt if you are looking to get into tournament angling. So listen to him, because you can do it. This man was a hunter and an archer. And he's like, you know what? I can whoop people's ass fishing, and he is. Hookset Hoodlums, go check them out. Use the code HEELS10 for 10% discount. Hookset, they my boys. Good shit. Hookset versus everyone. Again, thank y'all for listening to Bass and Brews. You'll hear us next week. We have no idea what you'll be listening to. This drops today, which is Friday. And we'll see you next time. Hey-o! Hey, and Alex, fix our fucking logo music so we can see the whole logo, you bum.